House is now again in committee.
Madam Chairman, Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, in the sum of $7,750,136. Head 93.
Which head is this? 93. Honorable Minister, you may make your opening remarks.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, Madam Chair. Today, I first would like to start by thanking the wonderful staff of the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance. Since I joined the ministry over the last few months, I have seen and observed them continuously and tirelessly working to be able to execute the mandate of the government. And I am proud to be their minister, and I look forward to a very ambitious year coming as we continue to be able to execute the mandate of the government of Barbados. This afternoon, Madam Chair, I would like to theme my opening remarks as the remarks. And what do I mean by that? This ministry has taken on a decision that we are going to be 100% realization of all of our objectives. That means that we are going to be doing rejuvenation, we are going to be executing relocation, we have a registration, we also will be doing reconstruction, and finally, with the NHC, we will be doing a reposition. And I'm going to go through all of those step by step. Rejuvenation is essentially the ministry's position and project to be able to take over all of the derelict properties that we have identified that we could put back into good use and be able to make them available for the government of Barbados. And the shining example of that we've almost completed is the gatehouse at the Old Barbados Water Authority facility. This is the first one, and I believe that will soon be completed. After that, I expect soon to be handing over to the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology, the former Sanitation Service Authority building. Then after that, we'll be doing the warehouse building at the Barbados Water Authority, the welfare building, and also the school meals building. So we have quite a few buildings that we've identified that we're hoping to be able to rejuvenate them, put them back into good use, and rather than renting accommodation for various government ministries and agencies, these buildings will be put into use. And that is our rejuvenation project. Our second project is the relocation project. And that project is at Rock Hall. You know that there are multiple people, those without title, that are at Rock Hall. That is the area adjacent to the airport. We've identified and have spoken in this house already about the major medical problems associated with that location. And we are moving full steam ahead to be able to relocate those people. In fact, the National Housing Corporation has already received sums that this Honourable House voted for them. And we've already started coming out the ground on several of those houses. And we anticipate to get that particular project done within a matter of months. The registration is an interesting one, and it's another project that this ministry is working on, because for the first time in, I believe, almost 2 decades, we will soon be registering a district The last minister that registered a district was Ambassador Liz Thompson. So you could imagine what time has elapsed since we were able to register, have a registration district, and that has now gone through cabinet, and we'll be soon be having a registration district. And we're going to go further than have a registration district. We're looking at a way that we can have the whole of Barbados become a registered area within another 5 to 7 years. And we'll be having conversations with the people of Barbados, and in particular those who are in conveyancing, the attorneys at law and the surveyors and so on, to find ways and means in the new, more technologically advanced world, how we can execute and implement a faster registration for the people of Barbados to make the whole country, every property registration area. Reconstruction is another thing that we're doing, and that relates to the software at the land registry. And this is absolutely important, because when we live in a new technological and digital world, we have to be able to do conveyances of land in a faster, more seamless, and if possible, in a less expensive way for the people of Barbados. And we've been searching and identifying, we've gone through many technologies, looking for what we want as best and looking for best-in-class technologies, and that soon will be available. Once we can get the procurement out the way, that will soon be put in place at the land registry, and we'll then be able to do more online transactions in a faster, seamless way to be able to reconstruct how they have done that in the past and what they will be able to do in the future for land registration. And of course, the best one, the National Housing Corporation. And that essentially will be the executing agent for the ministry. And we intend to reposition the National Housing Corporation to get back to building units for people to rent, to get back to building houses for people to buy. And let's be real. Many, many people of Barbados need to have housing. And there's a great demand for housing in Barbados. Not a day does not go by that some person or two or three or four reach out to me and say that they are looking for a house to buy. They are looking for a unit to rent because they're being evicted, because they and their partner have broken up, all sorts of reasons. The most popular one, the one that we've been trying to house a lot, because the house has burnt down. And there is a significant need. And not only have we been working through our database, the database at National Housing Corporation applications is in the thousands, and not tens of thousands, not 20,000, more than that. And we've been working through that database to check to see that the information is up to date, to check the numbers, to be able to get that database more accurate. And then we're slowly going to be building some houses through our various programs, be it joint ventures with the private sector, be it a new program that you've heard us talk about in the HOPE program. And that HOPE program is so vital, because what that is so many people have money to pay rent, but they don't have the deposit. And that holds a lot of people back from getting housing. So what the HOPE program does is the PE part, the photovoltaic, the providing energy, the RE again, renewable energy. What that does is that uses the renewable energy aspect to be able to make that deposit, to pay for the services, to pay for the land, so that people can use what they would normally pay for rent to pay then for a mortgage. And at the end of the day, the ministry is the Ministry of Housing, and we must look to house as many people as we can. So we have a very, very ambitious program, extremely so. We have a lot of projects going on. I'm sure that I may have missed out one or two that I'm sure the PS will remind me of, but I am very, very confident that this year will be the year of 100% realization. That is realizing the goals and realizing the dreams of the people of Barbados. Thank you.
Minister, please move the head.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd now like to move that head 93, Housing, Lands and Maintenance, in the sum of $75,757,136, Sam Park.
Thank you. Thank you. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you. I have 7 or 8 main issues I want to raise, not all one time, obviously. I'll get to some of them. But since the minister is excited about the R's, let me start with a few R's myself. And rather than make comment,
It is R-E, not just R, R-E.
you want to speak? You want to speak?
He's coming. He's coming. He's coming.
Go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, some REs. Well, I have a couple REs myself that I'll raise some questions on. One has to do with the repayment of NHC tenants by Christmas of 2020, because it was considered very unjust and unfair. The situation that obtained, that some people had made a deposit, some people actually made payments. I think in some cases, very large payments, upwards of $30,000, $45,000, I think heard mentioned. And then other tenants next door to them in the same vicinity, same housing situation, same quality facility, had received their units free of charge. And it was considered unjust and not right that they should obtain, and the minister, government committed to repay such persons on their deposits by Christmas, I think it is, of 2020. Well, we're not far from Christmas of 2021. And I would simply like to ask, where are we with that? That is one RE. The other RE that concerns me is the program of refurbishment with respect to wells and sewage systems. We've had a couple of tragic circumstances around NHC estates, where tragically there was loss of life in Pine, for instance. And I think there was a sense of urgency that evolved because of the tragedy of the moment at the time. And just again asking for an update as to where we might be with respect to refurbishment of sewage systems and wells in around NHC estates. Minister is quite cock-a-hoop about the new program of rentals. I think it involves what they call quad projects, which will come on stream and afford people the opportunity to own. Because right now they're faced with rental situations which, by comparison, set them at a disadvantage as opposed to what the government is offering. And my concern with this is not that government is seeking to provide housing or to help with the provision of housing. My concern with this is, Madam Chair, when projects like these come on stream, when these developments take place, this construction is done, how are these units thereafter allocated? The people who have been on the NHC register for years, in fact, decades. And it's one of the most heartbreaking stories that you can hear told by constituents, that they applied to NHC years ago, almost in another lifetime, and they're not getting through. The new projects come on board. What does that do to the register of applications, to the list of applications? How are these new units going to be allocated? And is the mechanism for allocating them such that people who have been on the list for a long time who have just desert, are they going to be accommodated? Those are 3 questions. I will stop with that for now because I realize other people may have questions. And I'm particularly interested to hear the words from St. Andrew.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and also to the member for St. Michael West. First, let me address the first issue, which is the repayment of the National Housing Corporation former tenants, that people who now own the units and would have paid deposits. And I have to agree that these people should have been paid, and there have been obviously some difficulties in terms of verifying and the verification, of people, and then the verification of their bank account numbers. And I think what a lot of the issues that we were having is because a lot of these payments will be payments in bonds. The vast majority are payments in bonds. In fact, all are payments in bonds, and those under 5,000 will then be converted from bonds to cash. But people have to be able to give a verifiable bank account number, and then the National Housing Corporation had to verify that those are in fact the correct people and the addresses are correct. So the reconciliation of the program, and it is ongoing, I must tell you, every management meeting without fail, and any member of my team here can tell you, every management meeting without fail, I get a report on that, because I am absolutely determined that these people must get back their money, be it in bonds or those under 5,000 in cash, but we are determined to get them. If it was that the National Housing Corporation had the money itself and was to pay them back itself, I think we would have gotten a little further. Unfortunately, it has to go through another process because it is bonds, the Ministry of Finance, the Central Bank of Barbados, and it is the Central Bank of Barbados that has certain requirements that are absolutely have to be met. So we've had some back and forth to be able to get it done, but we are persevering. I believe that we would have sent over 200, but I'll ask the PS or maybe Mr. Cummins from the National Housing to be able to confirm exactly how much we've sent already, but I look forward to having those completed, and those will be done. The wells and sewage project, that is continuing. In fact,
But ma'am, if I may interject,
Sorry,
and if you don't mind, and the minister doesn't mind.
no, not at
Since
all.
we are on the topic, rather than move to another topic, could we have the numbers? I do not know the basis on which the minister would have committed to having this thing done by December of last year, bearing in mind all which he just said that had to be gone through. And to the extent that management reports are received with frequency, what exactly is the status now? How many people have received cash?
Let me give over to Mr. Cummins to
Thank
give the
you.
exact numbers.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, honorable members. My name is Clyde Cummins. I'm the acting general manager of the National Housing Corporation. As to date, we have processed 575 persons to receive refunds under the program. It's a continuing process. We are now in association or in collaboration with the Central Bank to have refunds issued as of the end of this month. That is for the ones who are under $5,000 who are getting bonds, redeeming the cash thereafter. But the process for the ones over $5,000, as I said, is a continuing process, and we are now trying to verify all those informations before all of the relevant information before we get back to the applicants for the refunds.
But ma'am, there are 575 persons involved in this process. And we have processed 500 and something. But how many people have actually received money? And we passed December, as was the commitment of the ministry. 1, 2, 10, 6, 12 people have received a cent.
Good afternoon, Leader of the Opposition. No one has received the refunds as yet. As I said, there's a process. We are going through the process. We are scheduled to make the first set of refunds by the end of this month.
Thank you, Mr. Cummins. And let me go on then to the wells part of it, your second question. And our wells program, and let me also add, it's not only the wells, it's also electrical upgrade. And I am going to ask also Mr. Cummins to report on the wells and electrical upgrade program.
The wells program is one of the NHC programs that are also a continuing process. There are a number of wells of which we have identified 135 that are critical. Out of those critical ones, 68 has been completed. We are working on 37 are in progress. After those are completed, then we will go to the others that are identified to be processed. We have completed the area of the Pine and its environment, the Pine Wildy, and those areas. We are now in Gall Hill, Silver Hill. We have completed Haynesville also. We are in the process of doing wells in Deacons also. So it's a continuing process, but we have identified most of them, and we are getting towers there as we go on.
And the electrical?
The electrical program too, we have started the electrical program. We have identified, I think there's 2,600 units that are to be done. We have completed Haynesville in totality. We have completed Bagitel. We've completed Haynesville, Bagitel. We are now in Deacons, Rosemont, and Ferniehouse. After that, we are scheduled to go to the other areas, Gall Hill, Silver Hill, and Watton.
Does that answer your question, Leader Opposition, or you want me, can I go on then to the third question? Or do you have a follow-up question on that one?
You may go ahead, Minister.
The third had to do with rentals and quads. And we're actually going to be starting the first quad construction at Coombs House, which is White Park Road. The reason that we have made a decision to go for quads is quite simple. The quads are small and doable as opposed to the large towers. You know that we would have had towers built in Barbados, the Grotto, and also at Valerie. Those tend to take very long. And when we worked out per square foot what it costs, it meant then that the rental that is charged versus the square foot was really not an equitable situation. Whereas the cost for quads, by being small, not having to have an elevator, not having the recurring expenses, also the opportunity for people to have 2 windows in their bedroom, as opposed to the townhouse design, which is essentially a pass-through unless you're an end unit. We've decided to move to the design for quads and get in, build the quads, and then have them available for people. Allocation is a difficult problem, of course. And yes, I have to agree with the opposition that it is heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking, some of the stories that come to you. To me now, they come to me on a daily basis. And sad. And we live in a time, when I first was a member of Parliament, funnily sitting down next to the Leader of the Opposition, because we sat next to each other for 5 years, people could reach you only when they came to your office or telephone, maybe email. In the current world that we live in, people reach you by all of those that they used to reach you before. But they also reach you by Facebook, by Instagram, by text, by WhatsApp. And they send you pictures of the conditions that they're in. They send you stories of very difficult social conditions that they have to live under. But the government cannot do all. The government can't build a house for every single person. Right now, the allocation has been going primarily to fire victims. And you understand why. Because of fire victims, somebody that happens unexpectedly. Many people don't have insurance of their homes. So the allocation has been going mainly to fire victims, but I'll ask, again, Mr. Cummins to discuss allocation, or maybe we could even ask the chairman of National Housing Corporation, Mr. Morton Holder, to discuss allocation as well. But it's difficult. And this is why we have to find other ways and means of providing housing. That's why we have the joint ventures with the private sector. And you know, that's why we're doing a program for single mothers. And let's get real, the vast majority of single parent, as much as I would like to be gender neutral and talk about single parents, the vast majority of single parents in our society are single mothers. And they are under significant strain, especially in this COVID environment. especially with people having lost so many jobs, so many places that they work not reopening. It's a difficult time. And anybody that says it's not difficult is not being true to themselves. But we are trying our best, and we work hard every day at the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance to be able to provide a better housing for as many people as we possibly can. But I'm going to ask the chairman, Mr. Morton Holder, to discuss allocation and how allocation is being done by the National Housing Corporation.
Thank you very much, Minister. Good afternoon, through your chair. The National Housing Corporation is a very, as the Minister would have alluded to, difficult process to actually allocate to everyone that comes with a request for rental. We would have lost some of our units that are available to be rented based on the giving back or the some of those individuals who would have received their houses through various programs. So at this time, as we receive requests, what would happen? We will look at it, and there's some that are fires, there's some with abuse that's happening within the location. So we have to really and truly look at it very carefully as we determine where those places will be allocated, those homes will be allocated. As the minister would have said as well, as we go and build those quads, we are now really looking to increase our rental stock. As we increase those rental stocks, and we will go back to our database, we will go through those lists and ensure that individuals that require the homes will receive them. Thank you.
Ma'am, you'll forgive me, and I don't mean to press it, and I can sense the seeming pain and heartbreak that the minister feels, and perhaps can share that. My difficulty is not understanding that there's a tremendous backlog. That will always be the case because government doesn't have the resources to meet all of the demand at the same time. And I insist that the approach is wrong, even now. But my question, my concern has to do, if you're building new units right now, almost in the immediate future, how are they going to be allocated? Am I going to see or hear of situations where somebody approaches a minister or somebody, MP, this person is not on the list, has not applied for loan, and they are going to get preference over people who have been on the list for 10 and 15 and 20 years. That's my concern, because that list of backlog stays there as new interest is expressed and people are given the benefit over people who will be waiting for a long time. That's my concern. And I don't think that has been addressed.
Honorable member for St. Andrew.
Madam Chairperson, I thank you for giving me the opportunity of responding to what has been said so far in this debate. Having left the Ministry of Housing as minister so abruptly, I did not get the opportunity to thank those officers in the ministry who have played a very significant role in my tenure, as my short tenure, 2 years as Minister of Housing. And I know some of them today might be operating under some trepidation because of the fact that I can't say that I have been, or rather I didn't put them to the sword in a way in that I wanted to get maximum from all of my officers. But I certainly would like to compliment them for the excellent role they played in positioning us to the point where the Minister of Housing can now be speaking in terms of 100% implementation policy, calling the year 2021 the year of 100% implementation. I mean, this is not, in all its exuberance, this is something that I would like to say that is impossible, but I would like to not only take my hat off, I may take my pants off to him.
Please don't.
If he can achieve that. But if he does, I think that the kudos should go to the officers in the Ministry of Housing, the permanent secretary, the chief planning officer, the manager of the National Housing Corporation. I'm sorry that the former manager of the National Housing Corporation is not with us, because he certainly played a very significant role in the planning, and it was unfortunate that when we were more or less on the verge of presenting to this House, it would have been good if I was able to present the 5,000 houses in 5 years rather than the 500 houses in 1 year that the magical minister who succeeded me could claim that he would be able to present the next day. But I will, as I said, COVID has intervened even before and after. We had our own difficulties, and I would like to assure the permanent secretary, present permanent secretary, that celebration which we were not allowed, or which was not possible at that time, that it will come at some particular point in time. It doesn't necessarily have to come within this term, but I certainly enjoy the confidence of that team. And I would say that it is one of the best teams that I have ever worked with. We spent a lot of days and nights planning that 5,000 program in 5 years, and it was a pity that it could not have been implemented. I am particularly glad, notwithstanding the financial constraints during those 2 years, in that we could not, and we understood it at the time, we could not get the finance necessary or that we would have liked in order to implement that program. COVID intervened. Well, COVID has again intervened, but that program we could not have put together because of the difficulty with respect to the poor management of the ministry, or rather the National Housing Corporation during the previous 10 years, and there are a lot of things that we had to do. And it is good to see that the present Minister of Housing has been able to at least garnish the finance in order to do what I was unable to do because of the circumstances of that time. As I said, in his exuberance, the planning for the next year, the year of implementation, is very serious, because there are a lot of things that goes into the Ministry of Housing in terms of the planning, and he himself has alluded to certain challenges already, notwithstanding his promise of 500 houses in 1 year. But in planning any housing project, one has got to take into consideration the problems with respect to the availability of land. I think that the last administration was fortunate in that we had acquired vast tracts of land, and at least in terms of land, the amount of land that was available for their projects were there due to the land bank that was created in the past. But in terms of the plans for the Ministry of Housing, I believe that the question of the availability of lands is one that is very, very, very important. The acquisition process is one that takes some time. The planning process is also one that takes some time, and one could be excited about having a plan, having next year to be a year of implementation. But the planning process, I recall, and here again, I regret that the manager of the National Housing Corporation is not here, because he almost he shed tears at a meeting at one particular point in time when he alluded to the fact that they had expended a lot of energy in having the project at Lancaster come to fruition, and when they were about to sing their praises, an officer from the ministry of, or rather the chief architect in the ministry the ministry that responsible for drainage, I think that was in the Ministry of Public Works, denied him that opportunity, in that they had to go back to the drawing board to do drainage in a particular area. It cost government an additional $2 million. It delayed the project by a year, and there was nothing that they could have done about it. So these are the type of challenges that one faces. The question of transparency. I know sometimes in order to get something done, you break all the rules. And the Ministry of Housing is one where every year during the last administration came before the Public Accounts Committee because of the fact that the Auditor General's report was not very favorable to them. I mean, and if you want to be, if you're really serious, or you're talking about 100% implementation, well, it means that you know, you will have to be very, very, very lucky if you don't break the rules. And you know, one good thing about the Barbados Labour Party, when you go back over the years, is that we have never broken the rules in this respect. And the question of transparency, I note in the presentation of the Ministry of Housing with respect to their program for the next 12 months, as they say. The ministry, and in this respect, I know that the rules for this debate does not allow for any lengthy presentation by the minister, but I believe that he could have been a little bit, he could have leveled a little bit more with us and let us know exactly what are the plans for the ministry. I don't know exactly, an onlooker, we don't know exactly what are these grandiose plans for the ministry, in the Ministry of Housing. I will do, but if I may do some of his work for him, but the ministry's agenda, as specified by him, the National Housing Corporation, whose staff over the years developed skills in construction and maintenance. Yeah, he came here today, and he is talking about the National Housing Corporation skills, and yet in this same program, we have plans for the restructuring of the National Housing Corporation. I think I would like to hear from him what are the plans for the restructuring. At least he has been there for quite some time, and he should be able to tell us what those plans are. But getting back to the question of transparency, and we have always been in the forefront of transparency. We knocked the last administration very hard because of their failure to be transparent. You had situations where I'm told, and there's evidence, where the Minister of Housing used to invite contractors to a particular area and give out the contracts on the spot. We are now hearing that certain individuals would be given contracts. I do not know if I missed it somewhere along the line, but I think under normal conditions, these contracts of this nature must go out to tender, should go out to tender, and even if there are certain areas where you could bend the rules, at least in order to maintain the reputation of any previous Barbados Labour Party government in this connection, that we should know exactly who these people are. And the charge is sometimes made that whenever the Barbados Labour Party is in power, that they're interested in big business. I see mention of a Hope Inc., a new entity developed to complement the NHC to cater primarily to public and private sector workers earning up to $4,000 a month. Now, these are not the people that I heard the minister speak about. We talk about poor people. What are the plans for those people? The joint venture project with Pre-Concours Limited. I mean, before you get to Hope Inc., what is Hope Inc.? What is Hope Inc.? Joint venture project with Pre-Concours Limited, who is earmarked to construct 275 2- and 3-bedroom houses at Chancery Lane, Christchurch. There are a number of small contractors in Barbados during the previous Barbados Labour Party administration. I think we had over 2,000 housing solutions in the period between 1994 and 2003. And we didn't have no one contractor. Over 500 houses. And over 5,000 housing solutions. We had no one or two contractors. But I am only saying, it's not a criticism, but I am only saying that if these particular entities are to be allowed to carry out this type of work, well then we have to make sure that we follow the rules and that we do not, or rather that the Auditor General does not have to come to the Public Accounts Committee in the next year or so for some explanation as to how these contracts were awarded. The question of the, I mean, the Minister speaks in glowing terms with respect to the quads. You're only talking about 24 houses. I mean, I'm surprised that the Leader of the Opposition did not quiz with respect further on that, because you are talking about of a shortage of over 3,000, and you glowing a house, a year of implementation, 2019, 2021, 2021 to 2022, and you're only talking about 24 houses. You're only talking about 24 houses in the joint ventures with respect to giving out contracts to various individuals with respect to the joint ventures. The names of who are these 18 companies? I personally do not want. I know what the previous administrations were accused of, because as I said, we went all over Barbados, being very, very critical. Two things that we were very critical during the last general election: the question of the management of the financial affairs of this country, and the question of housing, the manner in which contracts were given out in the Ministry of Housing. Those are the two main things that all of us complain about. So we have to be sure. We have to make sure. I'm not condemning the minister for anything, because he hasn't been there long enough. I am just cautioning him that he has to make sure. I do not want to be in this house next year, the year after, where the Public Accounts Committee will be questioning the deficiencies with respect to what has happened in housing, especially at a time when the anti-corruption legislation is something that is being debated at this particular point in time. And talking about...
Honorable Member, your 3 minutes was up a little while. Just give the minister a chance to respond, and we can come back.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. First, it's quite a long dissertation, and I will try to pick up as many points as I can. The honourable member would remember that we actually started 15 houses at Todd's, and those are progressing quite well. 15 small contractors started there. We're next designing and about to start Rice's and Applewhite's. That'll be another 15, which will be 30 houses. You've alluded to the 24 houses at Coombs House, the quads. After that, we also have, as you said, what will be a joint venture. The joint venture policy is the same that the member would recall, because we followed the Harry Smith policy, which I believe you were the minister at the time when the Harry Smith policy was put before cabinet. And that is absolutely the same joint venture policy that we have followed. And what I'll do first is I'll ask the permanent secretary to respond with respect to the policy for the Harry Smith, and then how we are continuing and following that policy, and we're still working through that program. Yes?
Thank you, Minister. Yes, you are correct. The ministry went to the cabinet to approve the...
Sorry, sir, could you introduce yourself?
I'm sorry. My name is Timothy Maynard, PS in the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance. The cabinet approved the 2002 joint venture policy that allowed the National Housing Corporation to associate with private sector developers for the benefit of housing development in Barbados and citizens. The objective of the policy was to ensure that housing development could proceed in an environment where, well, government, we all know, government is strapped for cash. So the essence of the agreement is that private sector developers will be granted a lease or license of land in exchange for their financing, so they can put in infrastructure development. So that is essentially what the joint venture policy is, and there have not been many joint venture policies over the years, but we have found that it is essential at this time to engage the confidence of the private sector in helping government to obtain its objectives. With respect to the matter in relation to pre-Conco, National Housing is expected to engage with them in order to ensure that at least 275 houses are built. We are currently still in discussions with pre-Conco, but with your permission, Minister, I will ask the Chief Legal Officer of the Ministry to explain further in relation to that policy. Yes.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is Henrietta Bourneford. I'm the Chief Legal Officer of the National Housing Corporation. Ma'am, in relation to the land in question, we're proposing to develop land at Chancery Lane, the parish of Christchurch in this island. And the basis of this is the underlying policy of government to get persons back to work. And we're looking at capital works projects as a way, a means to facilitate that objective. A number of developers we'll be looking at, and one that was highlighted is Pre-Conco Limited. Currently, we are in discussions with the company in advancing that project. So we are still at the negotiation stage in relation to the same. Thank you.
Right. Short and sweet, honorable member.
I'm not very clear there. I believe this is the policy decision, and I know that the minister might be trying to evade the question. The minister, or I rephrase that, the minister might not be very clear with respect to his response to the question, Madam Chairperson. But I would just like to know, because I mean, this has been cast in stone as a fait accompli. I would like to know from the minister whether or not the decision has been taken to engage, definitely to engage Preconco. And I would also like to know what were the conditions and what pertained leading up to the decision to engage Preconco, whether there was a committee, whether there were other entities. What I made sure, I mean, as a previous Minister of Housing, that all of these decisions, no matter where the recommendation came from, that they went to the board of the National Housing Corporation, if the National Housing Corporation was to be involved directly in it. And the details of the transaction, I note that the minister did mention my involvement with respect to Harry Smith. Harry Smith was an arrangement which was made before I became Minister of Housing. And that is a project that never got off the ground. So you can't be using that as a precedent. I mean, and you also speak to about 18 other builders who were interested in joint ventures. And I'm just, as I said, Minister, I'm trying to protect you. I just want to make sure that down the road, nobody could point their finger and say that the Barbados Labour Party administration between 2018 and 2023 or whatever, and the Minister of Housing was guilty of certain infractions. And I'm just trying to protect you. No matter how excited you might be with respect to next year being the year of implementation, I think that this House has a right to know exactly what are the details of this transaction. That's all I'm asking.
Point of order, ma'am, or point of
Honorable
privilege,
Leader of Opposition.
ma'am, because I hear talk of a Preconco project. I hear about Hope Inc. I hear about the specific numbers with reference to quads. And the Honourable Member for St. Andrew is lamenting the fact that I didn't pursue further one of the queries that I raised with respect to those quads. But he obviously is privy to information which I do not have. So I don't join with him in saying I'm here to protect the minister. I'm here to protect the interests of Barbados as well. And I really don't have any of this information. I have a bare bones document that gives me some numbers with respect to expenditure for this ministry. But I don't have that type of information. Obviously, his levers are longer than mine, and therefore he's been able to access information which the Leader of the Opposition does not have. So I join him in asking for fulsome disclosure, as full as possible, because I certainly have even more of a disadvantage than he is. And I don't know, ma'am, if you are privy to these numbers as well. I might add you're the chairman of this committee.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much. And let me first thank the member for St. Andrew for his wonderful offer of protection. I guess that may be because he has on his solicitor hat. But certainly the permanent secretary and the legal officers of the ministry and of the National Housing Corporation are very capable and very able, and they will not allow any questionable activities to take place, but I will ask the permanent secretary to respond.
Thank you again, Minister. And I just want to say that I do not intend to breach the financial rules. I have never been asked or encouraged to breach them. When I am faced with a project, I make sure that I'm familiar with the rules. So I can assure the House that we will follow, I intend to follow the financial rules very closely. In relation to the 18 companies or the 18 firms that the Minister spoke, that the honourable member spoke about, the Ministry of Economic Affairs, in conjunction with the Ministry of Housing put out a tender inviting persons who wanted to associate with the ministries and who had access to financing to submit their proposals in writing. I think 18 persons responded to that tender. The tenders were evaluated by a committee, if I may say so, headed by the Ministry of Finance, members of the Ministry of Finance, Economic Affairs, National Housing, and it was eventually submitted to the Cabinet for consideration. And I don't know if Minister, if I don't attend Cabinet, so I don't know what the details are, but I know that all of the 18 companies were approved for submission of joint venture arrangements with the ministry. And those companies include Freehold. The financial rules allow, Rule 239 in particular, allow a particular company to be selected. It's called sole sourcing. If in the interests of speed, and we all are aware that the last 2 years have been unusual. We have been made to understand that the economy is suffering and will need to be kick-started by projects like transport projects, like housing projects. The minister has indicated that we intend to pursue a 100% execution program. And I don't believe that, really and truly, it means that every project will be achieved during the course of the new financial year. But I believe that these are goals that we must pursue. We must challenge ourselves to ensure that we can reach and attain those objectives. Now, and I'm not an economist or an accountant, but I am persuaded that we need those projects going, and we need to be able to make sure that they go quickly in the interests of the economy, in the interests of putting people to work. As you know, the unemployment rate is still extremely high. But it will be done, if I'm at the ministry, in accordance with the financial rules. I don't think that I've ever broken a single financial rule, and I don't think I will do so in the future. So, Freehold was approved in accordance with the same Rule 239, and as a matter of interest, there are several projects in the pipeline for refurbishment and rejuvenation of Crown properties. We're in the interest of speed, in the interest of survival of the country, as I understand it, we have to move quickly, and so Rule 239 will be sought for the Cabinet to approve matters via that process. I should also state that there is a provision, I think it's Rule 232 in the financial rules, where you can at least send quotations out. And we have sought quotations from we sought permission of the Cabinet to issue quotations to a number of people. We have received numerous responses, well, several responses, and Cabinet makes an allocation according to recommendations. I just want to repeat, as long as I'm at the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, I do not propose to breach the financial rules, and the Minister certainly has not encouraged me to do so. But I want to thank my former Minister for putting us on our guard to ensure that we continue to be forensic, to use the word of a former member, in the discharge of our duties. I also want to thank him for his opening words when he mentioned about the diligence shown by the staff. And I'm sure the staff has heard him and appreciate his kind remarks. But these are goals that we really have to meet. They're high and lofty goals, but I believe that we can attain them. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. Honorable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Chairperson. First wish to express best wishes to my colleague, the Honorable Minister, as well as to his team for the best success in this ministry. I mean, it is a key social policy ministry. Housing is, in my opinion, one of the 3 or 4 major challenges faced by the government and people of this country. And I note that even though the Minister said, 100% implementation this coming financial year on projects, and he also implied that, and I totally agree, that the state in a small island developing country such as Barbados cannot fulfill the housing expectations of its citizens. It is impossible. Ministers of housing, after ministers of housing from both administrations have come in with tremendous enthusiasm under the previous Barbados Labour Party administration of the Right Honourable Owen Arthur. I think at one time there was a projection to try and build 2,000 houses a year. Couldn't happen. There have been other projections even before, and it is impossible. As the Minister said, well, he revealed the figure that there are over 20,000 applications for housing or housing solutions at the ministry. I believe that recently, Minister, and you may wish to speak on this, you would have done a project in terms of trying to see how many of the applicants still need housing today, because as has been said, particularly by the Honourable Member for St. Andrew, some applications have been in there 15, 20 years. I think the Honourable Leader of the Opposition might have mentioned that. So how many applicants today need housing? But I know over the years, at one time, I know in a previous administration, there were about close to 30,000 applications. And it is impossible. Each of us, I'm sure, each of us members of Parliament, and certainly I could speak for myself, 3 days doesn't pass that a constituent of mine asks for a government house. And the truth of the matter is, let's face fact, in a lot of cases, some of those asking us for a government house really can't afford it, because they've now lost their job within the last year, but has been said that they're finding the present rent difficult to pay. The landlords, understandably, because a landlord is a businessman and needs money, pay mortgage, whatever, understandably asking them for rent. And the reality is that it falls on us as the people's representatives they come and ask us for housing solutions, and it's impossible to deal with. It is heart-wrenching, yes. Most of our constituents who ask are single mothers with children of an age, below adulthood, children going to school, and it's heart-wrenching to be unable to provide the housing solution, but that is the reality. and it isn't going to change in any short period of time with the best political will in the world. I mean, we have looked at housing solutions that the Cubans are able to provide. The Cuban state probably has best been able out of the countries in our region to provide state housing for its people. But, I mean, the truth is outside of the Scandinavian countries, which have been able to fulfill most of the housing needs of its people who require state housing, and perhaps Singapore. There are very few other countries, if any, in the world that have been able to deal with this. And Minister, I want us with the enthusiasm and looking at that historical record to still temper it with reality. And the reality, in my submission, Madam Chair, is that we have to therefore provide the facilities for the private sector to be able to intervene and provide housing solutions too. And I understand that that is therefore the concept that the Minister and his Permanent Secretary are speaking about down Chancery Lane. But I mean, these are small tokens. I mean, the quads, yes, in White Park, that Honourable Minister you brought to the House last month, but what, 24 housing quads or 40, I can't remember which one. I mean, these are just small drops in the ocean. And really and truly are not going to make any fundamental difference to our ability to provide housing solutions for our people and those people who could afford housing solutions. General view of, I think, most of our constituents is that the NHC is going to provide housing that is below market cost in terms of rent or purchase price. And of course, that can't go anymore, Mr. Honorable Minister. But you
Honorable Member, is this a comment or you're rounding up to question?
Well, I'm going to lead up to question.
Because you're past your time.
Okay, let me round off. So I'm just wondering what is the policy of the present policy of the ministry in terms of facilitating more private sector involvement, of course, within the rules. I'm not so sure that we have the land bank capacity now that we would have had when the Honourable Member for St. Andrew was first Minister of Housing. But how are we going to facilitate greater private sector involvement in the provision of housing? Are we going to, again, intervene at state level to reduce mortgage interest rates, for example, as was done in the last Barbados Labour Party administration at Barbados Mortgage Finance, which I think was done quite successfully, and at least get some more houses than the state could normally, under normal circumstances, provide. That's my first intervention. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank the member for St. James North for his question. And I have to agree fully. Government cannot do everything. I would have said that at the opening. And the only way that we can even make a dent in what the requests are, or the requests that come in for housing, is with partnering with the private sector. And when we do that, it means a win for the person that gets an opportunity to get the house, a win for those who work in the private sector because of the creation of jobs, and working together is the only way that we can do it. And it means financing as well, coming a lot from the credit unions and from the banking institutions. That's the only way that we can get it done. So once we've made that decision, through the tender, we've looked for strategic partners, mainly to do the construction of the houses. The HOPE program is important because, as I said, a lot of people don't have the money to pay the deposit. So what the PE part, the photovoltaic part, the providing energy part, home ownership providing energy, gives an opportunity for that price of the deposit to be offset by a lease to be able to provide energy through the photovoltaic returns from the photovoltaic systems on their roof. So, and the Hope, by the way, project is essentially a program where we would have a central location, a person, company who goes and negotiates discount contracts and negotiates with contractors, small contractors. Many of them, we're starting with the first 15 that would have responded to the tender. There'll be an additional tender for other contractors to come in and build houses according to the Hope designs. We're starting at Lancaster. There are 186 lots there, and we're going to be launching that very shortly. The other program is a private contractor who also responded to the tender to be able to build houses, and he's not only building the houses, he's taking on the responsibility of putting in the roads and all of the services. Government doesn't have the money to put in the roads and all the services on the land that it has. So he's undertaken to put in the roads and the services, and then he will seek to find the people to buy the houses, and the government will be paid for the land. So we're trying to get as many housing solutions built. And yes, it's difficult because the cost of a house is very difficult, especially those in the private sector. But what we can control is the price of the land. And that's what we're doing. So we're trying to keep the price of the land down, or to offset the cost of the land, offset the cost of the services with these other ingenuitive activities that we're planning.
Honourable Member for St. James North, we invite your second question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Under sub-program 0532 of this head, there's an allocation of monies for tenants who are purchasing under the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act, which of course is one of the landmark pieces of social legislation of a previous Barbados Labour Party government, starting with the Right Honourable Tom Adams. And I believe $750,000 being proposed for allocation for next financial year. I'm concerned over this concept. As I said, this is a piece of legislation that, 40 years ago, enfranchised thousands of Barbadians. We know the historical basis of it and land ownership, and certainly within recent years, not enough funds were allocated to the ministry to allow the state to provide its subsidy as required under the law so that tenants could purchase the land on which they lived for 5 years or more. And certainly before I became cabinet minister, and I had situations in my constituency, Dublin Road, for example, where tenants paid in money to the state, their aspect of the subsidy, their part of the subsidy of the purchase price of the land, and the state didn't have the funds for its subsidy under the previous administration. So the state had the purchasers, my constituents' money for 8 years, not providing any interest on the subsidy, and unable or unwilling to provide what the subsidy should be, the part of the state subsidy, so that the purchasers can own the land. And I'm wondering, Honourable Minister, what is the policy on this here, whether you believe the $750,000 is sufficient for this purpose. I mean, I have tenants in my constituency, and my constituency is one of the few constituencies out of the 30 that does not have any National Housing Corporation housing. but it has tenants and tenantries, and the tenants want to own the property, the lots that they live on, like anybody else. And I'm wondering if this is sufficient funds for allocation. What is the policy on this? Permanent Secretary is well aware of what I'm speaking about, because this is not the first time he's been PS at the ministry. So I'll give the opportunity for a response on that.
Thank you. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Member. First, let me say that I do understand the idea of some tenants wanting to own, but interestingly, we have provided a program for other tenants of the National Housing Corporation itself, to be able to come and purchase their land, and many people have not. And it begs the question, yes, some people want to purchase. And I think it goes back to maybe education as well, to educating our people that it is better to own their land rather than to continue being a tenant. And I think that is the part of the fundamental problem. Because we have many, and I wouldn't want to say, well, maybe I should, even a family member of mine who was a tenant of the National Housing Corporation before I was born. And I asked her, you have an opportunity, why don't you purchase the land? And she said, no, she's very comfortable being a tenant, and she will continue to be a tenant. And there are many people like that. So there's a combination. There's some who want to continue as tenants, and there are others who want to own. And I want to encourage those who are tenants to try to pursue ownership, because it gives you an opportunity to bequeath the land to your heirs and successors. It gives you an opportunity to mortgage land should you need to be able to access money urgently. There are many, many benefits to owning the land that you are on, that you've been a tenant on for many, many years. With respect to that particular program, I'm going to ask Ms. Nicole Johnson, Housing Planning, to explain the policy. Ms. Johnson.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair. My name is Nicole Johnson. I'm the Chief Housing Planner in the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance. With respect to the query raised by Minister Hinkson, the persons have to pay their share of the purchase price first before the government subsidy is disbursed. What we have found over the years is that we have only been receiving receipts from about 8 to 10 persons. So the funds allocated for that particular item represents what we've seen over the last couple of years. So we don't ask for, like, for example, $500,000, and then we don't utilize that in the subsidy. So once we know that we put in the amount of money that we know that we are able to pay each financial year, and the $375,000 that we ask for tends to cover the amount that is required to pay the subsidies. I am familiar with the Dublin Road St. James matter, and all of those subsidies have been paid to the persons. So those outstanding subsidies have been paid. Thank you.
And
Madam
Chair, my final intervention relates to housing for, and I thank the officer for that response, I really do. I'm aware that the Dublin Road, matters have been sorted out now. Like I said, it was under previous administration that I had, to use an unparliamentary word, goodies in trying to resolve. But housing now for I apologize. As I said, that's unparliamentary. I had tremendous difficulty with dealing with housing for persons.
We call that inguinal hernias.
Pardon?
Inguinal hernias, not goodies.
Hernias, okay. A neutral word. Housing for persons with disabilities. Again, a concern of mine. We know that the white paper and followed up by a green paper 20 years ago, or almost, 2001, 2003, under previous Barbados Labour Party government of the Right Honorable Owen Arthur would have had as a matter of policy that 10% of state housing should be reserved for persons with disabilities. I am not so sure that any political administration subsequently has, either then or subsequently, has been able to fulfill that role. But again, it was a noble policy and concept, you know, to try to accommodate some of the most vulnerable persons in this society. It would mean, obviously, that the housing identified would be retrofitted for persons with disabilities in terms of their immobilities and maybe their hearing impairment, their visual impairment. And I'm wondering, Honorable Minister, if that is still the policy of your ministry, and if so, whether your ministry intends to ensure that it is not only the policy, but it is implemented as well. Because again, we owe it to persons with disabilities, some of our most vulnerable people, to have such a policy and implementation thereof in place. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you again. The policy, we have not pursued that, but it's certainly something that we will have to look at. And it takes me back to when I was the Minister of Transport Works and Maintenance. And when we were designing the electric buses, we made sure, and the member for St. James North was well aware, that we made very sure that the electric buses were able to accommodate disabled people. As you know, they have ramps for the wheelchairs, and they have other devices, flip-down chairs, so the wheelchairs can be accommodated, and special seat belts for them, and things like that. They also kneel. So I do appreciate the need for the disabled. It's something I must admit, having to deal with the tremendous amount of work to be done at National Housing Corporation just to meet the basic need for the average person and the fire victim and the person who's been suffering abuse has really taken the focus, but I will recalibrate and look to see what we can do for disabled people as well. And I thank you for that intervention.
Thank you. Honorable Member for the City.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And first of all, let me thank the Honorable Minister and his team for the work that they've been doing throughout this financial year, even in times of difficulty and restrictions in relation to COVID. I've been particularly impressed with the program that deals with the refurbishment of all government buildings and putting these buildings back into service. And so impressed have I been with that program is that I am wondering if there is a similar program, if the minister or any member of his team can say, a similar program in relation to the existing stock of estates within the country. You can speak of 2 or 3 of them in the city of Bridgetown, where maintenance has been a serious issue for a number of years, even before we came into office, to the extent that some persons have had furniture damage and so on because of leaking roofs. And generally speaking, some of the estates are in bad order, as we would say. And I'm speaking of maintenance outside of the rewiring exercise that I know that is on the way. And so I'm just wondering if there is a similar program that would facilitate the refurbishment of existing estates, and especially at a time when there may not be a lot of funding available for the construction of new estates. And this for me is a very, very important thing because, yes, housing remains high on the priority list of the demands of the constituents of the city of Bridgetown. And then my final question, which is associated with this, is when the Barbados Labour Party was last in office, I remember that there were a number of superintendents, I believe, that were assigned or allocated to some of these housing estates. And these superintendents, they were able to really do a lot of work and cause a lot of work to be done within the estates to keep them looking a certain way, even if it was just getting some of the items that were required and getting persons who reside within the estates to be able to do some of the work. So I'm wondering if there's any thought being given to going back to this, because it is something that worked well, and that would also help to give the estates a facelift. And those are my two questions that I would like to pose to Minister and team. Thank you.
First, let me thank the member for the City of Bridgetown. Yes, our rejuvenation project is a good one because to be able to bring a building back into full use is something that is important. Not only provides jobs because it reduces the government's rental bill, but also because it maintains our heritage and also maintains the ambience and the look of a particular area. You know, when I was at Ministry of Transport Works Maintenance, every day I would pass by an abandoned former Barbados Water Authority complex. And we had several meetings and said, no, we couldn't leave it like that. We had to be able to improve it. And we started with the gatehouse, we're moving into the warehousing area, and then we'll do the 3-story at the Barbados Water Authority complex. And then, as I said, the Sanitation Service Authority, the welfare building, right there on the other side of the road from the National Housing Corporation. Currently, there are tenants of, I believe it's ICBL, and we're hoping that once we get that welfare building going, refurbished, that also will be able. But I'm going to ask Mr. Brian Hines, I believe he's here, to be able to give us an update on the rejuvenation project before I then go to Mr. Cummins or the chairman about the maintenance of the units. Mr. Hines?
Thank you, Minister. Good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is Brian Hines. I'm Property Manager at the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance. With regard to the rejuvenation project, we've made great strides in a number of properties. The Minister has alluded to some of them, but I believe one of the major ones that has not been made very much mention of today is the old Supreme Court former registry building at Quarry Street. Work is proceeding there at good pace, and we will be able to bring that building back into use, where we will have the Law Reform Commission, Magistrates Courts, Coroners Courts, Family Court in place there in the first phase. Then in the second phase, we will look to utilize the remaining space in the building for court-related activities. But that building is one of the major buildings within the World Heritage area, and we'll be bringing it back to its former glory as part of this project. There are a few other buildings as well that we will be pushing ahead with in the Garrison area, Block C, for the Town Planning Department. That building will be refurbished. There were little environmental issues there resulting from lack of maintenance. One of the issues that we are fighting with at the ministry with some of our buildings. We are now moving forward to try to rectify that and putting proper maintenance plans in place so that we can keep the building stock and government accommodation in good stead going forward. One of the critical areas that is required to do this is funding. The government is providing us with some funding to do this. We are looking at other methods to come up with a sinking fund to push forward and make sure that we can keep all of our buildings in good stead going forward. But the rejuvenation project is moving ahead at good pace in the first phase, and we're looking to execute it even further in the next financial year. Thank you.
And now with respect to the maintenance of National Housing Corporation units, you first have to understand, though, however, when we deal with the maintenance of National Housing Corporation, I believe 4/5 of the units were essentially given to the tenants who had been occupants for 20 years. That meant that there was no rent coming in from those units. However, the government continued to maintain those units. So what has happened is the cash flow that the National Housing Corporation used to have in the past to be able to maintain units was significantly cut. And that caused significant difficulties for the National Housing Corporation, not only from the point of view of maintaining the units, but also from the point of view of expansion and building other units. So they've had difficulties, and yes, like you, Minister, I too have 3 National Housing Corporation districts in my constituency, and I have one of the oldest, Pleasant Hall, not as old as yours at Pondside, or at Kensington Lodge, or at London Bourne. But Pleasant Hall was there, I think, from when a Member of Parliament by the name of Mr. Talma was a Member of Parliament for Christchurch. So that would tell you how long that Housing Corporation estate has been there. And of course, the older it is, the more maintenance it needs. So maintenance is an issue, and funding is required for that maintenance with limited funding. And of course, we continue to maintain almost all. But I'm going to ask Mr. Cummins, and then maybe we also have Dwight Thornhill as well, who can also add, because he's in charge of that. But maybe Mr. Cummins first.
Thank you, Minister. Good afternoon again. As the Minister said, the maintenance of NHC units has become a very difficult process. And this process has been exacerbated through the fact of the 20-year program that was introduced by the previous administration, where about 75% of the rental stock in Barbados were given to tenants. And that has led to a significant reduction in rent, the rents that we used previously to plow back into the maintenance of the units. And that has caused us a tremendous strain. But right now, I think that Mr. Thornhill, our Chief Executive Officer, who is intimately involved in the process, he can enlighten the House more adequately as to the type of challenges that we have in maintaining the remaining rental stock that we have.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, honorable members. My name is Dwight Thornhill. I'm the Chief Estates Officer of National Housing Corporation. I would like to reiterate what Minister Duguid, as well as Acting General Manager Clyde Cummins said in relation to some of the maintenance challenges we not only incur at Kensington Lodge, Pondside, and London Bourne, but across our estates. Due to the fact of the 20-year divestment program, we still, as I said, have a lot of rents coming in, but 4/5 of our rental income has been slashed due to the 20-year divestment. And at this point in time, until those units are being fully divested to the tenants, we still have to maintain those units because legally we still have ownership of them. So basically we're only getting funds for 1/5 of our rental units, but still have to maintain the full pie, as it would say, of units. So in terms of financing, we are, as I said, it's very difficult with limited financing to maintain all the units. We have many challenges with the sewage systems, the maintenance of that. We also have challenges with just the general upkeep, but we do our best with what we're given, and we try to make the most, and we deal with these situations as critical, especially critical situations, as expeditiously as possible.
Thank you. Honorable Member for St. Michael Northwest.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have about 4 questions I would like to ask the Minister and his team. And I first wish to welcome the Minister and his team. My question relates to the same 20-year program that was established under the last government. And I am aware that this program was put on hold and had to be reviewed because of the incompetent structure with the way it was executed. But there are some tenants living in housing units within my constituency that obviously last year and this year would mark 20 years with these tenants residing in these units. So I wanted to know what is the status with this program in terms of these tenants being able to own these units? That is my first question. My second question relates to the conveyances of some of these units as well that are still pending. There are situations where there are tenants who may have extended their units, and because of various reasons, some of these tenants weren't able to obtain their conveyances from National Housing, right? Sometimes I think there were situations because of structural issues and what's not. So I also want to know what NHC is doing to rectify that issue as well. And my third question relates to the electrical upgrade. I heard the acting general manager mention a few areas that are within my constituency. And again, some of these tenants have extended their units, and because of that, some of them have informed me verbally that, they have been overlooked in terms of having the electrical upgrade being done to these particular units that have extensions or extended structures onto them. So I also want to know what NHC is doing to rectify this issue in relation to these particular tenants that may have extended structures built onto their units. And my fourth question now is that there is Crown land, growing bush within my constituency, and I also want to know what NHC or what plans NHC has on the table in terms of constructing more housing units to really help cushion the impact when it comes to the volume of applications of those families or persons or individuals that are in need of housing units. I thank you.
Thank you. Member of Parliament for St. Michael Northwest. First, let me go one by one. The concept of continuing or restarting the 20-year program, no decision yet has been made about that program by the Cabinet, and I guess that we will have to make a decision on it because other people are now saying they have now reached the 20-year level and that they should also be considered, but no decision has been made on that as yet. With respect to the conveyances, yes, in fact in my ministerial statement I made it clear that once we were able to get the refunds done, that simultaneously we were also working on a process to be able to do conveyancing for those people who did graduate under the 20-year program of the previous administration, because up to now, even although they don't pay rent, they still have not, many of them, thousands, still have not been able to get their conveyances. Some of them, and you alluded to it, some of them because of extensions, which may have gone or close to the boundaries that they shouldn't have done. But we are pursuing, even if we have to pursue legislative changes, a paper is about to go to Cabinet very shortly that has been suggested by the ministry, and we'll put the options before the Cabinet of Barbados and we'll come with a decision. But I'm of belief that some legislative changes will have to come in order to be able to convey those other remaining, I think it's about 2,500, something like that, those other remaining units that people have not yet had their conveyances for. The electrical upgrade, we have the person who heads that here, one of the people who head that is Mr. Ward, and I'm going to ask Mr. Ward to come and comment on the electrical upgrade, and in particular how the illegal extensions or unusual extensions have hampered that program. Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Minister. Madam Chair, members of Parliament, good evening. My name is Roger Ward. I'm the Project Coordinator, National Housing Corporation. I have the responsibility of overseeing the electrical upgrade program. Let me indicate to the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northwest that all units within his estate will be upgraded. Our policy is that all of the units will be upgraded. Our policy is also that the extensions will have to be done by the tenants. We have written to all of the tenants, so informing them. That policy has been working so far quite effectively. When we did Haynesville, quite a few of the tenants there who had extensions, they engaged the contractors to do what work was necessary. And let me indicate that in a lot of instances, the extensions, the wiring in the extensions are more modern than within the units, and some of them do not require any extensive work. However, tenants do have the option of engaging with the contractors to do any work that is necessary within the extension, or they can have their own private electricians do whatever work is necessary. But as a policy, no unit is exempted from the upgrade. At Deacons, all 325 units are being upgraded. At Fernyhurst, all 154 are being upgraded. And at Rosemont, all 69 are being upgraded. Currently, because of the COVID situation, we are concentrating primarily on the external works. We had started interior work at the Deacons Farm Estate, but we had to suspend that at the request of the CMO when we had the outbreak in January. But we will be getting back to that as soon as we're given the all clear by the Chief Medical Officer and his team. But all units are being upgraded.
And for your fourth question, I do agree that we have to look at all vacant lands to see where else we can do our housing solutions. And I know that I don't know if Exmouth is in your area, but it is certainly close, and I'll ask Mr. Raymond Lord, our Chief Housing Planner, to be able to respond to that question.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the House, ministers. My name is Raymond Lord. I am the planner at the National Housing Corporation. We are currently reviewing a lot of our land stock and looking at where we can do higher density solutions. We have to be careful because we want to make sure we create good livable spaces. We do not want spaces where there's a crowding or higher density of people as opposed to housing. We are looking at Exmouth is a site that we're reviewing very carefully and doing some planning on. We also have some additional sites that we did before at Deacons that we are reviewing again. We are also doing, as we said, Coombe South. We're doing some work at Lower Burney. So across the island as well, we are doing these types of housing projects. We also have planning going on at Grisette's Great House that we've completed some of the design work. And we're looking as far as St. Peter now at a particular area to try to bring some housing to those areas. The aim is to produce, as I said, good livable spaces that are not essentially crowded. Social housing does not mean that we put people chock-a-block, but we want to have people in spaces that are livable, that their children can play, and that lend themselves to a good standard of living. So we are looking at those areas carefully. In the city and the peri-urban areas, we have to, as I said, be very clear in our planning to make sure that we have those spaces that you don't want to create concrete jungles. We don't want to repeat some of the things we've done in the past that we have brought from overseas. So we are looking very clear. That's where our quad design lends itself very well to good living, and we're working on those things carefully and as diligently as we can. Thank you.
Honorable Member for St. James South.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I've listened to the Honorable Member for Christchurch West as he shared about the issue of housing under his ministry, and let me congratulate the ministry on the work they're doing because it's so very important. A number of members have already raised the issues that are of keen importance in relation to the housing units, whether it's the maintenance, the wells, the transfers. All of these are very, very relevant. One of the positives, however, that I want to congratulate the ministry for really is the amount of work that you've generated for employment for some of our people who've been unemployed and the small contractors. So I would like to ask if you have currently an update on how many small contractors have been able to get work through the housing program and how much employment have we been able to generate so far. And I believe that you have more projects on the table for which I would be very grateful to have people from the constituency of St. James South to obtain some work, whether as contractors or as workers on your projects. So I would also like to know how many jobs and opportunities are upcoming that more people can engage, that they can take care of themselves. That's my first question. Thanks.
Thank you, member for St. James South. I guess I can go through a quick list. It's not an exhaustive list, but I can tell you that we're constructing houses at Applewitz, and there'll be 3 houses there, and there'll be small contractors there. I'd already mentioned Todd's, that we're doing 15 houses for small contractors there. At Carpenter's Glade, Leadvale, also Concordia Gardens, Carpenter's Glade, and Leadvale. We're doing 5 houses and 5 houses respectively at each of them. Those are not really for contractors. Those are people that we've been able to, we will be adding to the Ministry, National Housing Corporation. It's a short contract to be able to build houses for our relocation project. Together with, then there'll be another 25 houses at Parish Land in Christchurch. Rice's will be small contractors. 9 houses will be there. As we said, White Park will be 24 units. Clifton, we are looking to do 9 lots there. It means putting in the road first. Concordia Gardens, that is a large one that was actually designed, the road was designed by the Ministry of Transport Works Amendments when I was the minister there. And we're looking to do 164 house spots there. Parish Land Extension, we're fairly advanced in that location. The road is about 60% complete. The water is almost complete, and as soon as that is done, that'll be another 20 house lots there. In addition, we have relocations at Farmers, and we're doing about 5 house lots, 7 houses for the relocation at Farmers. And then, of course, Vespera Gardens, which will be under the Hope program, 175 houses, and the Chancery Lane will be 275 houses. So a mix between small contractors, medium-sized contractors, but certainly trying to get as many people to work in a diverse price range as possible in as many locations and touching as many areas of the country as we possibly can.
Sorry, you didn't share with us the work generated with the electricals?
With respect to the electrical, I'll again go back to Mr. Ward because he would have a better idea of the number of contractors. But in fact, we've just looked to expand that program as well. Mr. Ward.
Good evening again. Currently, within the electrical upgrade program, we have 20 small contractors in place. On average, they employ between 7 to 10 persons each. So at any given point, we have around 180 persons employed within the electrical program. We recently put out an expression of interest to expand that program. We have received several expressions of interest, and those will be evaluated, hopefully taken to the board within the next couple of weeks. So I would say if we added another 20 small contractors, that could equate to an additional 180 to 200 persons employed in the program, which would bring us close to 400 persons employed within the electrical upgrade program.
Okay, thank you. And let me say how much I appreciate the opportunity for people to get work because it's so hard. My last question, and I'm not sure if you have the full answer to it, but I would love to think that this is under consideration. As was shared earlier, housing is a big problem for us here in Barbados. We do have a long list of persons who have been waiting for a long time, as was mentioned earlier. We also have the phenomena where a number of young people, they are not in a position to purchase. They've started their families, and we have situations where people find themselves having to build a little something in the yard. And this is presenting tremendous difficulties to these families. And internationally, it's said that in terms of the future of housing, that right now, possibly 52% of the world's population actually lives in urban centers, and that by 2050, close to just under 70% of the world's populations will live in urban centers. Barbados is small. The availability of land is limited. How are we going to address the need for housing, given the fact that at the moment we are challenged, and then we have the future issue where we need to do expansion of population? What are the plans? What are some of your planners thinking about in terms of where Barbados has to go to revise its entire process for housing of Barbadians? The other problem that I would like you to address as part of what should future housing look like and how would we approach it as a country would be the issue where the cost of housing is a lot, and people take 20 years, 25 years to pay off a mortgage. What is happening now is that you get a mortgage for your family, maybe it's a family of 5, but before you finish the mortgage, the children have grown, they've left, and you are busy limping to the end of your mortgage. You hit retirement and then don't have enough money to take care of the unit. It seems to me that there needs to be a whole revolution about home ownership, how it should be done. So I'm just wondering if any thought has been given to how Barbados will deal with this as a future problem that we have to deal with and cope with, because part of it is here and more of it is coming.
Yeah, thank you, Member for St. James South. As you would have heard earlier, the way that we've decided to move is with strategic partners with the private sector, because they would have the financing to be. The biggest problem is putting in the infrastructure, putting in the roads, putting in the wells, the services, the electrical, the plumbing, the piping, the drains, these kinds of things, the curbs and slippers, those kinds of things into developed land. So the only way that it can be done is by partnering with the private sector, be able to try to meet as much of the demand for housing solutions as possible. And this is why we've implemented both the policy for partnering with them through the NHC and also through the new HOPE program. With respect to the concept of mortgages, really, yes, I think something for the Ministry of Finance, but internationally, the reverse mortgage has certainly made tremendous strides. And essentially what it is people use the equity in their homes to then be able to access funds to do other things or to refinance them when they come to the end of their mortgage with either some sort of balloon payment or reduced percentage at the end to be able to reduce their mortgage payments and then use some of the equity otherwise. So yes, housing is changing. The urbanization of the world is happening, as you mentioned as well, and it's partly because people want to be near to services And it doesn't really apply to such a great extent to Barbados, because even although, yes, we have rural, urban, and suburban, they're essentially all quite close. In fact, the Minister for Maritime Affairs will say that the whole of Barbados is considered coastal, because we're nowhere more than 7 miles from the coast anywhere that you stand. But what it comes from, and that really relates to people moving from rural areas and moving into urban and suburban areas. And that's because people want to be near to services. People want to be near to better electricity supplies. People want to be near to better internet. People want to know that they have a good choice of restaurants, a good choice of services. And that is the way that the world is going because of technology, because they see these things in commercials, hear it on the radio, see it on TV, on YouTube, whatever it is. Then more and more of the rural population is moving into urban and suburban, and that's the way the world is going.
Thank you. We welcome the Honourable Member for St. Michael Southeast.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I want to first of all extend a welcome to the Minister and to his entire team. I'm pleased to hear the previous submission, how important to the PS and certainly to the Minister it is to make sure that the funds allocated to this ministry are spent correctly. And I do recall there were several occasions on which the affairs of the National Housing Corporation in particular have been brought into question. So it really is pleasing to hear that the money is allocated and any contracts issued will be spent correctly and in accordance with the financial rules. That said, this area of housing is very near and dear to my heart. I have one of the largest housing areas in the country, and I echo many of the sentiments that most of my colleagues before me have also shared with the Chamber. Of concern to me, however, is the issue of maintenance of the units, particularly the housing units. And I start there because I believe it was stated earlier by the Leader of the Opposition that in relation to the Pinelands area, we had a very tragic circumstance about 2 years ago in relation to a young man who had lost his life after falling into a well, which would have been under the control and maintenance of the National Housing Corporation. Now, I remain concerned that even though we have had the funds allocated specifically to be able to deal with what is considered the worst wells in the St. Michael Southeast area and certainly across the country, that we still have a number of wells that have to be maintained. So I don't expect that we will have the same level of expenditure being laid on all wells across the country or even in the constituency. But I do think that the ministry should address the issue of the ongoing maintenance program. What is in the budget at this point in time to be able to allay the fears of constituents and certainly the wider population that a number of the wells across the country are going to continue to be properly maintained and inspected, and certainly that if it is necessary to allocate additional funds during the financial year, that those things will be given a priority. I think, as you know, in these types of communities, they're densely populated. You have lots of little children running around, sometimes totally unattended, and therefore the risk of exposure to them being able to harm themselves is obviously very great. So I would not want a repeat of what happened before, and I would want to hear from the Honourable Minister, first of all, and his team, what steps have been taken since that unfortunate incident to ensure that the maintenance program, not just in that area, but certainly across the country, has been improved.
Yes, to answer your question about the wells, as I was made aware, the vast majority of the wells that were done in the Pinelands, they're almost complete, and they were moving on to other areas. But what they've done, as I understand it, is they prioritized the areas and also the wells. So those were the most dangerous and most at risk to life and limb. Those were done first. And once they had those out of the way, then they start to then do the maintenance. But let me say, it's not only to be able to cover a well. When I first went to the ministry and I understood it, I thought it was to cover the wells to make them more secure. But then I was well and properly educated that a lot of it had to do with desludging, because a lot of the maintenance of the wells in all those housing estates, and there are many, many wells, had not been maintained for a long time, so there's a lot of desludging that takes place. There's a lot of making of a new well cap head as well before you then put slabs on. And what we also did as immediately when I came is I also asked that the slabs be made so that even a temporary measure was put in place so that they would quickly become, even if they're not desludged and they don't have proper well caps, at least they would be safe or safer than they were before. But I'm going to ask the person in charge of that well program, Mr. Dwight Thornhill, to be able to respond on the wells program.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bradshaw.
Good afternoon.
All right. As was stated, as I said, a tragic incident happened 2 years ago on July 4th. Young man, Kyrie Boyce, tragically fell into a well in Pinelands. And since then, National Housing has always been trying to maintain its septic systems, sewage systems. After that point, we went on a campaign where we investigated. We had an investigation of the wells and septic tanks in 10 specified housing areas. What we did, we looked at the older housing estates that had more deterioration to the sewage systems and wells, and we identified 135 critical wells to repair. I'll just give you a brief update. At present, as I said, as the acting general manager had said, 68 have been completed and 37 are in progress. And we still have another 30 to go as well. And we have been doing work in Pinelands, Wildy, Parkinson Field. To give you specific numbers, we finished 19 in the Pine, 10 in Wildy, 10 in Parkinson Field. We've also done work in the Deacons housing areas and environs. That's Deacons Farm, we finished 4 in Rosemont, and 11 in Ferniehurst. And we also have done work in Watton, Gall Hill, Silver Hill. We have finished 7 in Watton, 2 in Gall Hill, and we have also finished 3 in Silver Hill. And we've recently started Haynesville as well, Haynesville area, but as I said, we've just moved into the Haynesville area. In terms of, as Minister Duguay had said, not only are we dealing with the critical wells, but we also have some other wells that we need to do, like desludging work. A lot of these wells had not been desludged for a while. And as you can imagine, a lot of these wells were built for a particular capacity. But as the numbers and the density of the housing units increase, the capacity of these wells were reached much more quickly, so you need to desludge the wells to keep them in good working order. And the septic tanks, sorry. And you also clean the septic tanks and desludge the wells. And what we have also done, as well as Dr. Duguay has said, was to make sure to reduce our liability from some wells that may not be as bad. They may need to be done, but they're not as critical as the ones we identified. We started a slab program where we have reinforced concrete slabs. We're at a point in time where if we see a slab that may be defective or may be cracked, we can replace that quickly, and that reduces our liability to our tenants and the general public of Barbados as a whole. At present, we had a pilot program. We had put down about 35 of these slabs in Bonnets area, and we also did 15 in the Wildy area. But apart from the estates that we identified that were critical, as I said, we had identified 10 specific housing units. We were also doing other work because we also have other housing units, estates really, that require maintenance. So up to date, we have also conducted repairs to septic tanks and wells in Belle Plaine. We've done 2 there. We've done 4 in Bonnets. We have done 5 in St. Matthias, and we have done 7 in Eden Lodge. And as I said, not only are we looking at the older housing estates, but we are constantly inspecting our wells. And when we see an issue that's critical outside of our program, we're also addressing it because we have to make sure we protect the people of Barbados and our liability as an organization. And in terms of maintaining these septic tanks and wells in perpetuity, we're trying to make sure they're functioning as well. Because as you could imagine, if you have a septic tank and the density increases, you have problems with then they're reaching their capacity at a quicker time. So you need to maintain these septic tanks so they work and function properly so they don't overflow. And those other issues that you may sometimes occur in septic tanks and wells from time to time.
Thank you, sir. My follow-on question really relates to the other issue of electrical upgrades, because I know that I would hope rather that the same priority that would have been given to the wells would also be given to the electrical upgrades across the country. As you could appreciate as well, the units in the Pine have been built, and the Wildy area were built in the early 60s. I do feel that time is running against us in relation to the repair program that needs to be done in terms of those upgrades. I accept that there will be obviously the restrictions in terms of funds in any financial year. But my question, follow on from the first one, is really what is the process that is taking place in relation to identifying which areas are urgent? And has that survey been carried out across the country or in specific areas? And if so, how soon would the residents in St. Michael Southeast be able to hear from you that you are coming to that area?
Again, I'll ask Mr. Ward, as he's the head project manager for the electrical upgrade.
Good evening. Yes, Minister Bradshaw. In relation to the electrical upgrade to your specific areas, let me deal with the less difficult first. Wildy is scheduled to be undertaken within the financial year 22-23. You would appreciate, however, that in the greater Pinelands area, this estate, as you indicated, is well over 60 years old. We do have some challenges with respect to whether some of these units would even be able to accommodate an electrical upgrade as it stands. And we are in the process of inspecting these units to determine what approach would be necessary to do any upgrade to the Pinelands area. In some instances, we may have to strengthen the structures with respect to that. A lot of the units within the greater Pinelands area were constructed, you said, in the 1960s, but they were constructed between 1949 and 1955, and you would appreciate the standard of building within that period is not such that in all instances you can just move in and do an electrical upgrade. Some of those walls may not be able to accommodate any degree of knock-in, and therefore we would have to inspect and perhaps determine how best to undertake those upgrades. But that is something that is engaging our attention, and I assure you that when a determination and a decision is taken, that as parliamentary representative, it will be shared with you. But to your wider question as to the electrical upgrade program, there are some 2,687 units to be undertaken. So far, we've completed 325. We are currently engaged in another 520 units within the Deacons area. For 21-22 financial year, it is our intention to move to Gall Hill, Wotton, Silver Hill, and Pleasant Hall. So our program is structured. We intend to be able to complete the program once funding is available by the end of financial year 24.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. I think you have reinforced my point as to the urgency in addressing certainly the Pinelands housing area because of the long-standing nature of when the development was actually built in the first place. That leads me to the final point and question, which relates to the issue of policy. And the fact that given that a number of these housing estates are so old and that over the years, the repairs that needed to be done or the maintenance has really not been carried out to the level to which I suppose many of the tenants are satisfied with the accommodation. They've had to take onto themselves the responsibility of extending, and obviously that has created problems for the corporation. I'm curious as to whether attempts are being made to look at a national housing policy, and within that, a specific policy as it relates to the housing estates across the country, which would include the issues of what do we do with these units, obviously the ones that require electrical upgrades, looking at the sewage systems, looking at the encroachments, and of course, most importantly, the disposal of the units under the 20-year program. I heard the minister earlier refer to the fact that the legislation is going to be required. I know that we've been hearing that for a long, long time, and I would therefore want to make the call that that be dealt with expeditiously, because there are people who cannot get on with their lives because they do not have the documentation with which to either insure the unit or to make other decisions in relation to using it for bail or anything else. And I therefore think that this has to be given tremendous priority. These people have waited exceptionally long, and it is not just a case I'm making for my area, but I'm making it for all of the persons within the housing estates who have not yet received the conveyances, that we need to, if it is that we need more persons within the legal department to get this program accelerated, I certainly would support a move in that direction, because just like all of the other things that we've been trying to do to empower people to have their own housing, this is a particularly important milestone that we need to certainly reach. These people have just been promised a bit too much for too long, and we really need to bring this to closure. So Minister, those are my questions, and I really thank you and the team for continuing to try to expand the housing solutions available to Barbadians, and I know that with you at the helm, I'm sure that we will continue to have the same energy being brought to this as we brought to other ministries as well. Thank you. Thank you for that vote of confidence, Minister. As you're aware, yes, we definitely have that conveyance paper. My PS here to my right knows I ask him for that constantly, and I look forward to having your support when we have that before Cabinet. I don't know if I'm hearing next week, but I certainly want to have that before Cabinet as a matter of urgency. The PS is saying definitely it will be before Cabinet next week. Respect to the other issue, housing program, density reduction is clearly something that is extremely important. And in Barbados, we have the phenomena of, and I'll give you an example that's near and dear to me. A family moves in, 3 children, then those 3 children have children, and then in some instances, those grandchildren have children, and nobody moves out. And you have, I know of situations in one of the housing estates that is in my constituency, 18 people, 4 generations, living in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom unit. So clearly, density reduction is a major, major problem for this country. And housing, there are very few, if any, countries of the world that will be able to solve their social problems with respect to housing. Housing is a perennial problem, and it will have difficult solutions. But we are aspiring to do the most that we can. So density reduction is certainly something that we're looking at, and it means expanding the land availability. It means acquiring other areas of land so that we can provide social housing, be it for people to buy houses, but everybody can't afford to buy. Some people will have to be tenants for the vast majority of their time, and we have to provide those as well. Some people want to have just a house spot, and then they will build the house. But I must tell you, the experience that I have seen is that many people buy the house spot, but then never build the house. So you have developments where the National Housing Corporation or other developers sold only lots, and of the 30 lots or the 50 lots, you might see only 6 houses or 8 houses or 10 houses. Is that an appropriate use of the land? I don't know. Maybe we have to make a decision that it's better to sell houses. That way you do an appropriate development rather than selling house spots. Maybe you have to make a decision that you have a mix. Some where you develop the houses and leave some areas for house spots, because people might want to do a particular design. So there are many permutations and many combinations which we have to look at and to assess. But certainly density reduction is critical, and is something that is garnishing the attention of the ministry. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Andrew.
Minister, I am not so sure whether I have had the type of answers that I would have liked to have had. in this debate. I want to pose some specific questions. I hope the chairman of committees will bear with me with respect to those questions. Taking into consideration the number of problems that has been mentioned, he likes to use the word of reduction, density reduction. I prefer to use the word overcrowding. I know that when I left the ministry, we were at a point of bringing to the Parliament after the approval of Cabinet the white paper on housing. I think that if we have that white paper on housing, we would be able to deal with a lot of the issues. We'd be able to have discussion and at least give some teeth to what exactly we need in housing, because I mean, it took us a very long time in order to put that white paper together. And it was after about, I would say, about 18 months of severe planning, a number of meetings, and so far we haven't seen that white paper on housing. Dealing specifically with the program, the question of acquisitions, I heard mention you made, Mr. Minister, with respect to the building of more units. But we do not have, I'm not aware of the fact that we have the land. Is there a policy to acquire other lands in order to complete the housing program of the ministry? And with these ventures, these joint ventures that you're talking about, what will be the role of the National Housing Corporation? The National Housing Corporation, I think, has been unfairly treated in the press and elsewhere with respect to their capacity to deal with the housing situation. I think they have the staffing, and it is the only entity in this island. I mean, gone are the days when you had firms like Ideal Homes that really, and if you look at what has happened in the Kingston Estates, you would know what I'm talking about. We do not have that type of those type of contractors anymore, and I think that greater emphasis should be placed on the National Housing Corporation. I know I'm not saying that there should not be a restructuring, but the National Housing Corporation should play a lead role with respect to the needs at this particular point in time. And on the issue of acquisitions, it pains me. I am the parliamentary representative for the constituency of St. Andrew. And way back when I was minister, we acquired lands at Lancaster for poor people. Specifically, I came to this house, and I was very specific about it after consultations with the Prime Minister at the time. And we were dealing with people who lived on the periphery of existing villages, people who could not afford land at $5 a square foot. And Lancaster was identified. The Dingtown Development Project, I wonder whether or not the minister is aware of that Dingtown Development Project. I was very pleased when I heard the Minister of International Business yesterday speak to the need of outfitting certain areas for small businesses. That Dingtown Development Project not only spoke to housing, not only spoke to residential housing and commercial housing, commercial entities. It spoke to the provision of facilities for small business people, coconut vendors, barbers, you know, those type of people that ply their trade on the wayside, the bodywork men. We went. That program was so popular that there were some individuals within the St. Silas area who actually came and they identified certain areas that they wanted. I want to know from the minister whether or not he's aware of that Dingtown Development Project. In that connection, Madam Chairperson, we had, as I said, we had a situation where those lands were acquired for those particular individuals. Now, the last administration sent everything here where? Lands which were acquired for residential purposes for poor people were then not only used for commercial purposes, but for people who bought land in the area and didn't even live there. It is a legacy that they actually purchased for their family. And some of that land is still there. As I said in this house already, a similar thing happened in Apsil years ago when I was a minister. And we acquired that land for the purpose for which it's intended. Now, it pains me to see that not only this land is being utilized for certain commercial purposes. As I said already, and I will say it again if it's necessary, Shafet was never in the mix. Never in the mix. But if you are dealing with, if you have inherited a situation where this has happened, the people in Whitehill, I don't know if the minister has ever taken, the Minister of Housing, since he was Minister of Housing, has ever taken a stroll in Whitehill and has seen the living conditions of those people in Whitehill. I don't know if the Minister of Public Works has, since he was Minister. But see, if you are now coming and you are telling me, you're even calling this new development by some name that has no relevance at all to the poor people in Vesper Gardens in Whitehill, and we specifically stated that it was for the relocation of persons who were affected by the ravages of nature, people who could not afford to buy land at $5 a square foot. Well, if you have to do that, if you have to make a provision for these new developments, but then let us hear if you are having new acquisitions for the people in Whitehill and for the purposes of those people for who replace the people in Whitehill and the environs. When I was minister, we did a number of inspections at other lands, the additional lands at farmers. I have not heard in this debate anything about acquisitions. I mean, the minister is short on that. Where are we going to acquire the lands to speak to the housing development of which he speaks? Also, I haven't heard anything at all about the planning gains, because if you're not going to have the acquisitions, by now the planning gains of which the Minister of Planning spoke earlier, something should come to fruition. I mean, we are now almost 3 years into government, and these are things that we promised the people of this country, and that is why we have been elected. And I think that it would be a tragedy if come 2 years or more, these things have not even have not even started. I mean, the people in Whitehill, I mean, they live in conditions unbelievable, day in, day out. I mean, we made a pledge to those people, the first order of business, and nothing has happened. So I haven't seen anything in these estimates to address these problems which we have inherited. And I would like to hear the minister with respect to what is the policy of the Ministry of Housing with respect to those issues. And it would really please me to see that white paper on housing come to Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for St. Andrew. First, I want to thank you for drawing to my attention the white paper on housing. I will ask for that file and have a look. I had not been made aware of that work, and I look forward to reading it and see what work you were able to accomplish over the 18 months of working on that paper. With respect to the land acquisitions, we're quite advanced, I believe, in the same Belle Plaine acquisition. Now, granted, that was not technically a housing acquisition, but that was for the former Ermy-born residents, and that is the acquisition that we were quite advanced on. I guess why the acquisitions, you're not seeing a lot of money in for acquisitions. I think there's $2 million is in for acquisitions over the next financial year. Is because, yes, we are hoping to get access to planning gains. For those of you who may not understand, for opportunities for developers to develop certain areas. They give in exchange access to land that is vested then in a government entity, and that government entity can use that for the benefit of housing. However, those negotiations are still ongoing, and I wouldn't want to prejudice those negotiations. However, with respect to the other areas that we are looking at developing, I'm going to ask Mr. Lord again to come and give us an update on the other areas that we are developing. But I thank you for bringing to my attention, the work that you did for 18 months on the white paper on housing.
Thank you, Minister Payne, Madam Chair, other ministers. Currently, we are looking at a number of areas in conjunction with some of our partners. We're looking at Coconut Hall in St. Lucie. We're working on that as well. We're looking at about 24 lots down there. We're going through that process. We're looking at Colleton Gardens, Polaris Estates in St. Lucie again. That is about 80 lots. That is going through a process as well with the whole project. We are also doing some additional work, as we said, at Chancery Lane, and we are looking at some other areas in St. Philip, at Concordia Gardens North and Concordia Gardens South. Those are still in the planning stages and development stages. There are a number of issues with environmental matters that we have to solve at Concordia Gardens to get that forward, and there are a number of surveying issues that we're working on the southern aspect to get those forward. Together, those two sites in St. Philip should be in the Regions F brought to full fruition of over 220 lots. So we're looking very carefully, we're hoping to get those through. We are trying to spread the housing endeavor across the island into areas that do not impact heavily on things like agriculture. So we're being very careful in the sites that we select, and especially with sites that the Crown owns already, to reduce the bill to the government of Barbados. There was a question raised about a land bank. We have to again look at those things very, very hard and very carefully, because while we did have a land bank in the past and we did build houses, the net effect, according to my economist friends and some I've looked at, that you did push the price of land up, because you did withdraw usable land from the market at a rate which you could not use it. So the idea that we are thinking is that we acquire as needed, so as to reduce shortening in some aspects of the housing market. So we have to look at those things carefully again and make sure that we plan and strategize correctly. As to the names of the places that we are calling somewhere our developments, Tipianomy is the study of named places, and we're trying to again bring something new to the table. We don't want to have places to have the names like Wanstead Gardens infill or Lancaster Phase 1 or Phase 2. As I tell colleagues, those are project names and not place names. So Vesper Gardens, for instance, was chosen just a play on words, because on the western side of Lancaster, towards the setting sun, and Vespers relates to the setting sun, and we want to give people an aspirational place to live, so we added gardens. So you're going to see that sometimes we use the word estates, we use gardens, we use different plays on the word. Again, it is to bring something aspirational to the landscaping table. You don't want someone to say they live in the housing scheme. The housing scheme was a project. The housing scheme is not the place name. So those are the kind of things that we are trying to look at in housing, again, just to improve and move forward what we look at. Some of them might take the names of honor persons, depending on the direction that the government sends us in. So there are lots of projects going on. There are lots of environmental issues to solve and things like that we're looking at. We're trying to be careful and to work as best as possible within the planning framework that is given. As you know, housing competes with other land uses for the same land. So we don't want any conflict with our colleagues from agriculture, our industry, and things like that. So we are being strategic in our endeavors. Thank you.
Of course, with the greatest humility, what Mr. Lord is trying to say is that he's the person that comes up with these names. But before we move on, I'd like DPS to also talk about the house prices as it relates to these particular programs. Yes, Maynard.
Thank you, Minister. I'm aware that at Vesper Gardens, that the proposal is that the most expensive house will be less than $1,000 per month. So you have 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom houses I think one being sold at around $800 odd per month, and the 3-bedroom, $975 per month. Permit me to, Chair, if I could mention something about the white policy, the white paper on housing policy. The former minister is correct that we were working on that paper, and if I omitted to mention it to you, Minister, my apologies. But when you came in, you were very, very, very quick out of the blocks, as it were, in relation to the program that you mentioned, the rejuvenation program, the need to pursue employment opportunities for persons and the housing development. And you indicated that those were your two main objectives, housing as well as employment opportunities. The policy work that we were doing in relation to the white paper on housing, by the time the former minister left office, we hadn't yet completed it, but it was not put on the back burner. It has proceeded gradually, but the emphasis certainly over the last 7 to 8 months has been on those programs of housing development as well as reducing unemployment. The Chief Housing Planner is here, and she could speak more on the proposal in relation to the policy on housing, the white paper on housing. I want, though, and I had made a note earlier, to make mention of the restructuring of the National Housing Corporation that the Minister has mentioned. The Prime Minister has indicated as part of the PERC program that the National Housing Corporation should be restructured. Initially, it was supposed to have merged with the Rural Development Commission as well as the Urban Development Commission. As you know, the Rural Development Commission and the Urban are now pursuing an association to form a National Development Commission. The National Housing Corporation is spearheading those programs I just mentioned. The relocation of residents from Rock Hall, the unfavorable conditions at Rock Hall. So they're driving the housing policy and all of those developments that you recited, Minister, and they're also driving the relocation on behalf of the ministry. The National Housing Corporation, as the former minister pointed out, has been critical and have developed skills in construction. There is no intention, as far as I know, to wind down the National Housing Corporation. Actually, the skills are being utilized and called and pressed into action even more so today. Now, the restructuring that I mentioned, and I'm being very careful because I know that Cabinet and the Social Partnership have not yet signed off on the particulars, so it would be amiss if I were able to pronounce on something that Cabinet has not yet pronounced on. But if I could just give broad particulars. As I have seen it, and as the policy has emerged, there is intended to be specific focus on 3 different sections of housing in order to provide as diverse an accommodation needs as possible, cater for accommodation needs as possible. You will have, on the one hand, and as I say, don't want to go into broad particulars, close particulars, but on the one hand, you will have an entity focusing on the most vulnerable groups. Another entity, NHC for example, focusing on rentals and sales of land. As somebody mentioned before, the rental stock of the National Housing Corporation has to be replenished. So you have some persons who will never be able to purchase houses outright. So the intention is for, and recommendations are for National Housing Corporation to perhaps focus going forward on rentals and sales of land, development of construction of houses on perhaps a medium scale and so on. Well, there are other entities, and hopefully the private sector as well, that will also focus on the construction of houses for sale. Now, I think the minister mentioned about persons who have lived in housing units for a long time. The minister has spoken in his meetings about perhaps the need for persons who have benefited from units over a period of time to migrate eventually to housing ownership. So you're going to see a situation where, on the one hand, there's a focus on providing shelter arrangements for vulnerable people who can't afford it. Rentals for persons who can't afford yet the market prices, and ultimately another niche of persons who can afford. The intention is to migrate persons who can afford to leave the rental units and purchase a unit to be able to empower themselves by developing those units. There is something that the panelists tell me is called a housing continuum. And in this housing continuum, you focus on providing a range of shelter and housing opportunities for people. So that is how the intention is to structure these things in a systematic, in a focused kind of way, so that the niche markets are identified and people directed accordingly. But as I say, I don't intend to pronounce too much on that because I will be usurping the role of the cabinet.
Thank you.
Before we go on, I wanted to also invite two other contributions because
Just remember your 3-minute time limit on
Okay.
answer. Go ahead.
The former minister did ask about Whitehill.
Understood.
And I must say that when I was the Minister of Transport Works and Maintenance, not only did I visit Whitehill on many occasions, both formally and informally, but I was also instrumental on putting together the Complant people, together with the MOU, to be able to do the work necessary at Whitehill. However, at Whitehill, we have done some relocations. And, you know, we talk about small contractors, but we had a small contractor who was brought in to do some houses at Farmers. And he ran into trouble. And since then, now we've brought on the National Housing Corporation to be able to assist and complete those houses. And I'm going to ask Mr. Ian Foster to give us a report on how far we are as Chief Technical Officer for the National Housing Corporation for the relocation of the houses of the people from Whitehill to Farmers. And yes, we're definitely looking at Farmers. And then when he's finished, I'm going to ask Mr. Nicky Smith to talk us through the other acquisitions that we're doing through the ministry.
Madam Chair, my name is Ian Foster, Chief Technical Officer, National Housing Corporation. We have received the funding for the completion of the 3 houses at the ministry. We are ready to proceed, and in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks' time, we will be assigning officers there to start the completion of that work. We do not expect this work to take much longer than 8 to 10 weeks, and we look forward, as always, to being the executing arm of the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, and we assist in their relocation efforts in whatever way is possible that we are called upon to do so. Thank you.
And of course, with respect to the acquisitions, I'm going to ask Mr. Nicky Smith to give us an update.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Members of Parliament, I am Nikki Smith, Chief Property Manager at the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance. My major remit is the provision of accommodation for the public service. I'm also responsible for insurance of all government buildings. And of late, we have got the maintenance unit, so we are also responsible for maintenance of buildings. Our involvement in acquisitions relates to payment of compensation when lands are acquired and there are difficulties in reaching agreement in respect of acquisitions. The ministry is pursuing a number of acquisitions right now. I'm actually going to ask the PS to indicate the officers who will actually deal with those acquisitions, since that is not something that I deal with unless there's an issue with compensation.
Thank you, Minister. I'm aware that in relation, for example, Minister mentioned about the thinning out of the densities. I'm aware that there has been there are plans to acquire properties at Rock Close in the Plain to help to expand the opportunities for constructing houses there. I'm also aware that there are plans to acquire lands in Work Hall, in Work Hall in St. Philip, to be able to regularize a tenantry situation that is there that has needed urgent attention over the years. There may also be plans to acquire lands in Sergeant's Village to be able to build some quads there. The reality is that the minister has also spoken about wherever we can find available lots for housing construction that we should find. In the city, for example, there has been an indication that there may be some small lots, single lots, 2 lots at a time, for availability so that you can help to bring life back into the city. Wherever possible, some of those lands will be acquired. There are also, and this paper is being developed now, there's also the proposal in relation to derelict houses to be able to acquire some lands. I think the Prime Minister has also spoken about this at some point in time, to acquire some lands, some properties where they are left in a derelict position, to be able to work hand in glove with landlords, if the landlords can be found, to either enter into a joint venture arrangement to restore those, or if the landlords can't be found, to acquire the lands outright and be able to utilize them in particular conditions and circumstances for the benefit of people who really need that kind of accommodation. And I think it was mentioned that there were over 15,000 derelict properties, both the private sector and the public sector. And here I'm talking about the private sector options, where you can, if you can find people who are willing to partner with the government, you can utilize those, or persons who can't be found, if those can be acquired, persons who may have situations where the land taxes are exorbitant and they have gone overseas or whatever for extraordinary periods of time. Those kinds of options may be available. But certainly there is every intention to acquire and to deal with those problems so that the need for social and affordable housing can be supplied, and there is a substantial need, as we all know, at this time.
Thank you. Honorable members and guests, just to let you know, we have allocated 3 hours to this head, which ends at 6 o'clock. I have 6 more people to speak. I'm going to beg you for brevity. Preambles are not necessarily invited at this time, just to get to your questions. And we continue with the Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Okay, in that case, we continue to the Honorable Member for St. Michael East.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I'm always part of the marginalized. Just before lunch, I wanted to speak, and unfortunately, I was not allowed because of the limits on time. I want to speak because I strongly believe that he who feels it knows it. I am not a real estate developer. I'm responsible for any social services. I am a man who came up in a one-bedroom house at one time in Haggett Hall with my mother, having 4 children, not working. I was waiting on my father out of remittances to send some money home, probably every 6 months, and sometimes every 6 years. And I know what it is to sleep in one bed with 5 persons. And I was of the opinion that the NHC had a mandate from the people to provide housing for low-income people. And depends on which government is in power and who is the minister and who also is an officer within the NHC that is given authority even to name housing communities, which is a shocking thing to me as a member of parliament, that an individual within the NHC can name a community. And that is why sometimes you go in a community and you see a name that should not even be remembered in the history of man, not Barbados. The history of man, you see that body's name featured very high all across Barbados, not only on housing, but on streets across Barbados. And I was hoping that we'll reach a level of consciousness now that we'll be thinking in a completely different manner. I don't know what is happening. I heard all kinds of things, some contradictions in here today. I know that this government gave a commitment to the people of Barbados that immediately after victory, there were some old houses that I heard being mentioned. Some was constructed in the 1940s and 50s, and obviously coinciding with the birth of the Barbados Labour Party in that early stage. And I'm hearing now about these houses after 3 years or so after an election. The intention was that all of these houses in Golden Rock and all these areas were supposed to be demolished. And we was going to see new houses being constructed there. Let's be on a serious public conversation that requires all of us to be here for 5 days. This can't be a play toy environment. We have to ask serious questions regardless of who get vexed with the questions that are being asked. And that is the reality. Now I want to speak not on these generic points that are being made about this housing policy is this, and then the housing policy goes contrary to what the party's policy was as we enunciated it during the election campaign. I don't have a housing development. Since 2008, I went to the then leader of the opposition who subsequently became the leader, Prime Minister, the Honorable and late David Thompson, and asked about a parcel of land that stretches from 2nd Avenue, Haggett Hall, 2008. Government's taking up the taxpayers' money from 2008. The land is still there. I've not seen a trap cut out in the land to tell me there's going to be any network of roads or any form of utility services put in the land. I would have liked to, I am assuming that the land was paid for. I would not like to know that the former Prime Minister departed and we never got any money for it. But the land is there since 2008. The contradiction is this. I heard this talk about reduction of the density in constituencies across, or it can't mean in the island, but reduction of the density in constituencies that cause representatives to ask for parcels of land to alleviate the same problems of density. Now, after acquiring the land, being a person from within that community, coming from poverty and landless as well, no opportunity is given to that person because the person is from the specific community that you're saying that the density or the, as my friend from St. Andrew said, that the district is so clustered that it is overcrowded and therefore we must try to resolve the problem there. You then give people who can afford to pay the rent the opportunity to come into the communities and occupy the very houses that the rationale for having the houses was because they want to ease the density inside the community itself. Was that a contradiction? Honorable Leader of the Opposition, is that not a contradiction? Chair? I want to know what the situation is. What is the policy? Can I be given the assurance that if we are going to be consistent in what we're saying, that I would be allowed to have, I don't know when I'm going to get these houses, but at least when the houses are there, I need to have clarity and soundness in reasoning that the people in St. Michael's East, the Ivy, Barkers Road, Haggett Hall, Licorice Village, I need to know that when the houses, if I should get them within this 5-year period, that at least I know for sure, because my eyes will be wide open in my spectacles too. I want to know what percentage of those houses will be given or be made available to the people in St. Michael's East as long as they are qualified for them. And I would like to know what kind of qualification is required for those people. I know the history of the district well. There are too many low-income people that are landless, that are, in many cases, matrivocal families, mothers, one-parent families. You want to tell me that these people are not qualified? Not for 80% or 90%, but for all the houses. They're not been here all. They're going to be 100. And I got thousands of people all around me every day asking about housing and land. What is the NHC position on this particular issue?
Thank you, Honourable Member. With that, Minister, I would like to add the same thing for St. Philip North. I know I congratulate you on doing your best for me, but we have developments in Parish Land and River, and I'm sure the majority of residents, not in your time necessarily, are not members of St. Philip North that are in dire need of housing. All at you, Minister.
Yes, thank you. First, let me ask the member, I'm not aware where this concept of demolition of Golden Rock came from. I've asked the other members here, and no one seems to know that there was any intention to demolish anything in Golden Rock. But if there's something, we will research that. And then the other one, again, is Haggett Hall acquisition. I've asked Mr. Smith, I've asked the PS, and obviously it was under the previous administration. I don't know if they continued with it, but we'll have to look for that. But let me also go on to say, the people of the Ivy and the Pine, I guess I would have to say that they're near and dear to my heart, and the member for St. Michael East would understand why I say that. And clearly, it is something that we have to look at. But let me be clear. Will we ever solve the problem of being able to provide a housing solution for every single person that wants one? Which country in the world is able to do that? And which small developing state can do that? We can't do it on our own. We've had to look for partners, and we do the best we can. Yes, with limited resources, but certainly we are trying to do the best we can. I don't think the National Housing Corporation really could answer because they wouldn't have the land, and we now have to go and look to see if that land in Highgate Hall was really acquired. If it wasn't, what can we do to acquire it if it's something that we need to proceed on? With respect to the Madam Chair, parish land, yes, that is something. The biggest issue up there in that area in your constituency is some of the houses that were constructed under the previous administration were constructed in a substandard way. And I have to be frank with you, I've visited multiple times, we've assessed it. A lot of the windows are giving problems, they weren't installed appropriately, and we've had to do a lot of work on the windows. Because the houses were shut up for a long time, it meant that the tiles and the humidity got into the tiles, and a lot of the tiles have blown. Then, because again they weren't occupied well, it means that bats got into the ceiling, and they have problems with bats in the ceiling in some of the houses. In one of the houses I visited myself, it's actually positioned in the wrong location and too close to the southern boundary. So they have lots of issues there at that parish land. In fact, I often remark to one of my officers that I remember when we were in opposition, I did a video of parish land and the hundreds of houses that were up there shut up, and it went viral. And it was, I guess, my first experience of being a videographer and a viral video producer. But it is something that we've worked on. We've met with the residents, and we've tried to go through a program of remedial work as much as we can. And what houses we have left, we're offering them for sale as is. And the chairman of the National Housing Corporation has just approved that to be able to sell those houses as is, so that we will get more people housed and as much and as quickly as possible. But I thank the member for St. Michael East, and we will certainly look for this Highgate Hall acquisition, because that has not been brought to the table.
Well, Minister, I hope that the officers would inform you, and that you would not be in the same position as you earlier indicated when the matter was referred to on the white paper. Because I'm sure that we already purchased the land, and that there was a large sign at one time on that land, and the sign came from the National Housing Corporation. That is it. But the other issue that I'm concerned about, I got the impression that we had a community-oriented approach to skillful workers from within communities and contractors from within the communities doing work within the communities, and I would assume that NHC will be one of the agencies that would have been carried out and applying that model as a new form of our governance directions, all like now. The same criterion that we were hearing about before is still, from all that I'm gathering here, is still the one that is likely to continue in the future. What is the position on the concept of a community-oriented paradigm that we were advocating over the last 2 years? Is the policy at the NHC still on par with the policy direction that I thought that the government was going in? Are we still in that position, or is the case there where individuals from the minister down to the staff is now saying what the direction of housing will be in the future. Because I heard a strange approach. I don't know at what time poor people will graduate to have all the comforts. I hear this approach. I don't know if it's going to be a chronological approach. I don't know if it's going to be something going to happen simultaneously. But I hear that you will graduate from a rental unit to some other stage of unit. I hear all these things already. I heard that if somebody lives in a house for a certain period of time.
Remember, I have a few other people.
Yes,
that want to say
I'm just trying to. I got it a little jumbled up, so I cleared it up for them. If somebody lives in a house for a certain period of time, and as a result of education, they make some vertical mobility in terms of income, that the government's policy would be that they would graduate and move out and get a house to purchase. I heard that from the time I was born. I don't know, I was on earth many moons. I don't know what has happened. All of a sudden, the same thing is being said in a different way. And trying to make me believe that there's some new policy direction. And then I'm hearing that we will never be able to fulfill. Look, there are many things that are highlighted as ideal types in life, but you have to have an objective, an ultimate goal. And people who have been denied an opportunity to have property because certain people monopolize property over the years. You can't have a halfway arrangement. We have a responsibility to look for houses for poor people. Let's think about building houses and selling houses to middle-income people and the upper class people in the society. That has to play a secondary role. If it's a social institution, it has to play a secondary role in relation to the high demand for low-income housing. In my area, because of the situation that people live in, they could not even get water to wash their hands during the COVID period where they had a protocol. You had police running people off the streets. Because at the end of the day, people 40 years old don't have anywhere to live.
Honorable member, please, I beg of you.
Yes, I just want to reinforce the point.
I think you did.
Yeah, okay. Look, shelter is fundamental. And I want the NHC not to go off track. That's all I'm asking. What is the NHC position in relation to the skilled workers in the community and the contractors in the community and making lands available to poor people in my community and the other communities across Barbados? Others don't go ask these questions, but you're asking them.
Honorable Minister, please hold the answer for me 1 minute while I get to the Honorable Member for St. Philip West and the Honorable Member for St. John.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'll be quick. The Honorable Member would have spoken about partnerships with contractors. I want to know if the ministry is also seeking partnerships with landowners. When you think about, you're saying you're having problems acquiring land, that is something I would like to know if you've been thinking about that in terms of bringing a third equation into the thing to do that. And then also building of emergency housing across the constituencies. For a number of years when there are fires or people are put out of their homes, there are no places for people to go at all. And people are constantly calling constituency offices and representatives for housing in that particular area, if this is something that you would also be seeking to address. Thank you.
Honorable Member for St. John and then St. Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question to the Minister revolved around the urban development in St. John. Now, I know when I was at the ministry, plans were in train to develop Pool, to develop Wakefield, and Cherry Grove. I just want to know the status of those developments at the St. John locations.
Thank you. Honorable Member for St. Thomas. Your question?
Thanks, Madam Chair.
I wanted to place emphasis on government's plan for the over 3,000 people who have been appointed, to put them in a position where they will have gotten security of tenure, that they can approach the various entities to be able to purchase property and do other things for housing. And I wanted to find out from the Honorable Minister and his team if there's any plan that government has to be able to look at another entity similar to the mortgage finance company for poor people to get opportunities. We've got gas station attendants, general workers, and others who are really yearning to get a piece of the rock. But because of the way that they're being treated by the lending agencies, particularly the banks, they really do not qualify. But now that they've got their security of tenure, most of them, I would like to, the Honourable Minister and his team, to be able to indicate if there's any plan for government going forward to be able to develop another institution that will help these people to get a chance, because we are recognizing as a result of COVID, there are quite a few people who, because of the loss of employment, they've not been able to pay their mortgages, and they now are losing them and coming to get welfare assistance for housing, to paying for rent. They're going back up families, and they're more or less reduced to zero in respect of what is happening. I would like to find out that. And could I just add the final comment, please? Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. I also wanted to raise that whole issue of the possibility of what happens and what government is going to do in relation to housing. And it might have been mentioned in a way by the Honourable Member St. Philip West, where we know that in certain sections of Barbados, particularly in sections of the North, St. Andrew, St. Thomas, St. Joseph, perhaps sections of St. Lucie and St. Peter, there's land slippage in many areas. And sometimes we have dislocation with fires or flooding, and eviction is at a really high percentage now. And I know that the costs to the government for welfare housing is extremely high, where some landlords, I call some of them slumlords, I must tell you, are renting out houses where they're giving them rooms at $250 a week, which really amounts to $1,000 for a room. And then the windows are falling off. There's no proper toilet or bathroom facility. And persons are paying so much money. There really needs to be some kind of legislation. I believe if there is, the Honourable Minister will make it clear to us, where landlords must ensure that when they're renting housing, that it must be of such a high standard and quality that people can live with their dignity and be able to take out some of the suffering and so on that they are experiencing. And I would like to find out, ma'am, if government, if the legislation is in place, and then how can it be reactivated if it is not? Because I'm seeing and hearing so much of it every day that it is painful to have to listen to the challenges that these people have. And of course, now that we are having the expansion with housing, I would wish to find out if during these constructions, if as it was in Farmers, when the other honourable member for St. Andrew was the minister, if there will be a few houses left vacant so that those who are displaced will get an opportunity in a transitionary way to be able to stay in those temporary locations until they can then get different housing. But it really is a very, very frightening experience at this time. And the worst of it all is that there are senior citizens who are being evicted and mothers or women with children. And it really does not speak well of what is happening. And we therefore need to plan in a more purposeful way as we go forward to make sure that those areas are captured and that those persons are not put on the fringe of society, as is the case and we are seeing unfolding every day. COVID has really done us a terrible blow, but I will wish to hear from the Honourable Minister and his team what exactly is the situation. I wish to thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. At the end of your comments and answers, please give your wrap-up.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You know, the beauty of this exercise is that having the collective wisdom of so many people coming together,
we're able to realize and learn of new things that otherwise had not been brought to my attention. And what is interesting is from the intervention from the member for St. Michael East, information has now come that land was acquired from a Mr. Charles Thompson. Please forgive me for mentioning his name, but it's pertinent, at Highgate Hall, vested in the National Housing Corporation, of which lots were allocated to the Urban Development Commission. The 6 of those were allocated to the Urban Development Commission, and the other 12 lots, so it's only a total of 18 lots. Not a big development, but certainly something that we could use. And I've as the team would ask, I'm constantly asking about what other pieces of land we have that we can use. And there are 12 lots that were allocated to the National Housing Corporation. So of those 18 lots, Urban Development Commission had allocated 6, and we will be looking to look at these 12 lots to see what we can do to be able to do housing or what kind of facilities there at the Highgate Hall. With respect to emergency housing, it is a problem. And I'll be frank, as I understand it, when the National Housing Corporation in the past would do an emergency housing, areas to keep 1 or 2 or 4 units, once the persons move into the units, it doesn't become emergency temporary housing, it now becomes their housing unit. And then very hard or difficult for them to move out. So emergency housing units are a problem, and we recognize that. We had asked the IDC if we could do like a barracks type facility so that they could temporarily use those facilities for emergency housing, but they made it clear from the beginning that they are not really zoned as residential, zoned as commercial. So to answer both the member for St. Philip West and the member for St. Thomas, we are definitely and actively looking at what new ways and thinking outside the box that we can do to be able to provide emergency housing for our people, especially fires. Fires are the biggest problem. Yes, land slippage is a problem. Yes, we're doing relocations. We also went to, I think it's St. Simon's, where there's significant land slippage there, and we're doing that. But we also have to recognize that there are private individuals as well who provide housing, and it is partly also, and it's interesting that the Minister for St. Thomas would have brought this up, because partly, if we were able to pay landlords on time and better, more landlords would accept the money that is offered from the welfare department. Mm-hmm. But what happens is the welfare department will take 3, 4, or 5 months to pay a landlord. So it means then that there are many landlords then who don't want to rent social housing to people and take the money from the welfare department. Correct. And I would like to make a recommendation here on this floor that maybe the welfare department should look at paying a large deposit. Mm-hmm. That way the landlord himself would not feel he's in any way being victimized, waiting for 4 and 5 months. And that way we'll be able to make sure that that person who has suffered from a fire or who's having great difficulty will be able to benefit from getting a shelter. So that is something that I'd like to make a recommendation. And it's interesting that the minister from St. Thomas mentioned it, because that is her ministry. The issue from the minister for St. John, for Poole, Wakefield, and Cherry Grove, these are former CLECO lands, and I'll ask Mr. Raymond Lord to comment on those.
Thank you, Minister. Madam Chair, Ministers, we are currently working on applications for those. We are most likely going to go into some arrangement with our colleague company, Statutory Corporation, Hope Inc., to do some work up there. We are working with their people to finish up some designs. We had discussions last week on the one at Poole, and we're to have some further discussions at the ones at Wakefield and at Cherry Grove. But we do have applications for the Prime Minister's office. We've asked the Prime Minister's office to hold those in abeyance until we get some conclusion with our colleagues at Hope as the direction they want to go, so we can merge probably some of their ideas with ours and take a seamless application for it. It's taken us a bit of time, but we want to try to at least do that correctly the first time around. So we are still actively pursuing those opportunities. Thank you, sir.
The final question that the member St. Thomas raised with respect to is the ministry looking at a new financial arrangement
for people in the working class. Not that I'm aware, but it's something that we can look at. We thought that the credit unions do a wonderful job doing that, and we work and met with them, and we work very closely with them to be able to provide adequate housing solutions for our people. So just one other interesting thing that the minister spoke about is people renting rooms. Interesting. I lived in Dublin for a year when I was learning to be an oral and maxillofacial surgeon. They encourage us to move from university to university. I lived in a room for a year, and at that time they were called bed and breakfasts because they would provide breakfast for you, but it was essentially a room. And I understand that kind of living. I do not know if there is any legislation to be able to stop that from happening in Barbados, and I will be guided by my PS for us to research and see what it is. But what has happened is, I think the great need for housing has caused people really to take advantage, to charge somebody $1,000 a month for essentially a room without a bathroom onto it, just a bedroom basically, is something difficult. And it's certainly something that we need more research on, and to be able to find out exactly what the extent of it, but we see it. And I have seen it, and I know the minister, the member for St. Thomas has seen it as well. And certainly the Prime Minister has seen it as well. We encountered it just the other day in a particular area, and we've been able to rehouse those people. So it's a problem. It has come out of necessity, and it's something that we'll have to look at. In winding up, I would like to say, first, let me again thank all of the members from the ministry, all members who contributed in this presentation here in the well with the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance. I tried to give everybody a chance to make a submission, and I thank them for not only coming today, but for the persistent and consistent work that they make at the ministry or at the National Housing Corporation. We try every single day to be able to improve the lives of people. You know, the Prime Minister often says that perfection is the greatest impediment to progress. And in North America, they say perfection is the enemy of the good. They're both essentially the same statements. Are we going to be perfect? No, we're not going to be perfect. But are we going to try to do something to make a difference in people's lives? Yes, we're going to do that. And that's what we do every single day. Are we going to fall off the bicycle? Yes. But you know what? We're not going to fall off the bicycle and say, well, we finished riding. We're going to get back on that bicycle, and we're going to ride again. There was an interesting philosopher who said that people who are not prepared to try are not prepared to succeed. Well, we at the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, we want to succeed. With our 100% implementation, we want to succeed. With getting all of the relocations done, we want to succeed. With getting rental accommodation built for our people, we want to succeed. With rejuvenating all of the buildings and to bring back that semblance of our history and our culture, we want to succeed. And we will work at succeeding for the people of Barbados. I thank you.
Thank you. That being said, the question is, did he not move it in the beginning? Question is that head 93 in the sum of $75,750,136 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it. AG. AG.
You do not report his honor the speaker to pass, progress and ask for leave to sit again.
Question is that I do not report his honor the speaker progress and ask for leave to sit again. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported progress and requested leave to sit again. Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, this brings us to another pause in our proceedings. I'm grateful for everyone's cooperation. I therefore ask that we postpone today's
Suspend,
sitting,
sir.
suspend today's sitting until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning sharp.
The question is that this honorable chamber be suspended until tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning in the forenoon. And I'm reminding members of this honorable chamber that when we say 10 o'clock, that is 1000 hours, right? In military time, it's 10 o'clock in Bajan time. It's not quarter after 10 or 10:30 a.m. It is 10 a.m. exactamente.